You just went live.
We went live, okay.
Yep.
On behalf of the Syracuse City Council and staff, I'd like to welcome all of you to our City Council work session and redevelopment agency special meeting that we'll hold tonight. We're glad to have you here. By order of Governor Herbert, with Executive Order number 2020-1, issued on March 18th, 2020, suspending the enforcement of the provisions of the Utah Code 524202 and 524207 due to the infectious disease COVID-19. We are holding this meeting electronically. If it feels like we're using this with training wheels, we are. This is the first time we've held a meeting fully electronically. So if we make a few goofs or blunders, please be a little forgiving for us. We want to make sure that we are transparent in the things that we do in the city. And we want all who would to be able to have access to the meeting, either being broadcast on YouTube or having joined the meeting. Cassie, do you think I ought to mention the meeting ID on Zoom? Paul, can you give me some input?
It probably wouldn't hurt to do that.
I'm going to list that meeting ID. If you go to Zoom USA and you have an account with them, this meeting is 565-482-336. And you can actually join the meeting and see the meeting as it goes on. However, we have organized this under a few different rules. We've asked for public comment to be delivered to us earlier by way of email, and that needed to be done by 5 o'clock. So we will begin our meeting tonight. I'm formally calling this to order. I've asked Dave if he would lead us in a pledge of allegiance, and then Jordan, if you'd leave us in an invocation. Appreciate it.
It is still traditional to rise, and this, I guess, will be the flag that we'll use. I'll join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone, we'll go ahead and give a prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are truly grateful to be gathered together today as a city council and staff, and for all those concerned citizens. We ask you to please help us at this time, that we can know how to face this adversity, that we can be granted the wisdom of Solomon, that we can know the ways in which we can best serve the public, and also be careful to not spread this infection. We ask you to please bless those that are working on a cure, and those that are treating the patients, and all of those that are affected by this disease, that they can be watched over and protected, they can be comforted, and they can know those things they should do to better the lives of those around us. We ask a special blessing on all the citizens of this great town of Syracuse, that they can all be watched over and protected, that we can be able to know the things we should do to protect each other and to help each other while being safe. We're grateful for many blessings, grateful for a Savior who is watching over each of us. And this is our prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate the two of you responding at my request. I'm going to now allow Cassie. We have comments from 4 different individuals from the public who would like their comments read into the record for the benefit of those who have melded themselves with the city this way. The city council members have copies, written copies of those records, or emailed copies of those records too, to follow along. So Cassie, if you wouldn't mind reading those into the record.
Yeah, so this first email was sent by Whitney Lee. She says to Syracuse City Council, as a person with who is at high risk for COVID-19, I am very concerned about this pandemic. I am grateful for the action the city has taken, but it is too little too late. I am proposing closing Jensen Pond to vehicle traffic and a citywide shutdown of non-essential businesses. I understand that this will cause great economic hardship now, but if our hospitals become overrun, they become unable to treat people for other things like suicide prevention, car accidents, cancer, etc. This will cause more people to die, not only of COVID-19, but of otherwise treatable conditions as well. More deaths will lead also to economic problems. Yet the city has the power to lighten the load of economic hardship by halting utility payments for people and small businesses while asking that those who can pay to still do so, so we can maintain these essential services. Thanks, Whitney Lee. Okay, and then our next one is from Steve Miller. He expresses concerns with Briggs property townhome concept plan. Please refer to the attached concept plan for the below comments, and he has a plan on the second page of his comments that was emailed out to the council today. If I were a UPS delivery person and wanted to deliver a package to the front door of the townhome TH1 that is closest to Smith's Grocery and the front is on and facing 1000 West, where would I park my delivery van? Or if I wanted to pick somebody up at the same location, where would I stop my car to pick them up? The answer is probably 1000 West, a very busy and congested road. Would doing so block oncoming traffic? Yes. Would doing so cause oncoming traffic to swerve into the center turn lane? Yes. Would swerving into the center turn lane be a potential for accidents? Yes. Many cars coming from the back of Smith's use the center turn lane to merge into traffic. Would a delivery van parked against the curb block the view of oncoming traffic on 1000 West? Yes. If I wanted to park my pickup truck in the driveway of any of the townhomes, could I do so without obstructing traffic? No. The driveways are between 18 feet and 19 feet long. My truck is 21 feet 7 inches long, and it's not a long bed truck. If I stayed back from the garage door 1 foot, the back of my truck would protrude into the street a minimum of 3 feet, and in some cases 4 feet. Sunset Park Villa's driveways are over 23 feet long. If persons in 4 of the 28 townhomes decided to have family gatherings or parties and each had 3 additional cars, they could take up all the spare parking spots if no one parked in the driveways. Realistically, you could have far more cars than that. I can't imagine a fire truck trying to respond to an emergency, even being able to get into the project, not to mention navigate around the vehicles, especially if there were 2 or 3 full-size trucks parked in driveways obstructing the roadway. The bottom line, there are way too many townhomes being crammed into the little space. Whoever required that this type of project be relegated to 4.5 acres probably were right. One last thing, in looking at the elevations, I didn't see any elevations of the front loading garage units that would face west. It might be well to see what they look like. By the way, the open space listed on the concept plan will probably end up as a detention basin for stormwater runoff. Thank you for hearing me out. We as a community appreciate all that you do for the city. We really do. We know it's not an easy task trying to juggle everything, especially in today's world. Thanks again, Steve Miller, resident of Sunset Park Villas. The third email is from Patricia Jacobs. She says, members of Syracuse City Council, I would like to repeat my concerns about the numbers of ingress-egress points on 1000 West in the 1/4 of a mile between the exit from the Sunset Villas and the traffic light on Antelope. There are currently 4 of these on the west side of the street. The ingress-egress to the housing area on the west, the ingress-egress to the EOS gym and Warren's, the one just north of Warren's, and the one into Walgreens. On the east side, there is the entrance exit to the villas, the road south of Smith's, which is used almost as though it were a city road, the entrance into Smith's, and the one into the bank. That adds up to, at present, 8 entrance exits in a scant 1/4 of a mile. This is both a frustration and a safety concern for those who use this road daily as it now exists. Please consider this situation before adding even more congestion and more entrances into the road. And then this 4th one is from Dean Briggs. He says he's managing partner of L.E. Briggs and Sons LLP. To whom it may concern, it has been requested that I make a comment regarding the development of the property owned by L.E. Briggs and Sons, which is located east and south of the Smith store. Currently, the property has been under contract for sale for a year and 9 months. During this time period, we have extended the closing date of the original contract. The reasons given for the extensions have been the difficulty of obtaining approvals from Syracuse City for any proposed development. I, the current landowner, have not received any communication from Syracuse City during this process, as the buyer has tried to obtain approvals to develop. I do receive communication from the buyer that the city has tabled or postponed or is under consideration or other delay. As a longtime property owner in Syracuse, I do not feel that the property owner rights are being properly considered as part of the city's review and approval process. The time period for the development approval process has been excessive at best. Too many voices without standing, without ownership or rights to the property, are pressing influence in the process. I request that the property owner rights be placed at an extremely higher priority than has been currently applied and considered. Sincerely, Dean Briggs. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Cassie. We will speak a little bit more to Whitney's in a minute about the COVID virus, but we appreciate those comments from those that are concerned within the community. We value your opinion and we need to hear from you. What I'd like to do now is go through just a little bit for the benefit of the city residents who might be listening in on us, because I would like to call on Brody, our city manager, who is at the time also the manager of our EOC, and tell you a little bit about what the city is, have him tell you a little bit about what the city is doing. Back in March, on March 1st of 2004, George W. Bush, as an executive order, in conjunction with Homeland Security and FEMA, organized something called the NIMS management system. NIMS stands for National Incident Management System, and that system was designed to set a core set of values in the doctrines that we follow in an emergency and incident problem, the principles that we all follow together, the glossary of terminology, so we're all calling green, green, and red, red, and then the organizational processes that work together from the community through the county, through the state, and up to the federal level, so that we're all playing from the same sheet of music. NIMS and the National Incident Management System allows us some flexibility locally, but some standardization of how this is approached. Now, some time ago, about a month ago, we declared the Emergency Operations Center in Syracuse to be functioning. We are, I believe, Brody, at level 3. Is that where we're at? Is that the technical level we're at?
Yeah, I would say level 3. We're at a partial activation.
We are at a partial, we're not fully activated, but we have a functioning EOC that communicates with each other daily, electronically, and we meet right now we're meeting twice a week to get updates and make decisions that affect this locality. So Brody, I'd like to have you as the and what this does is it takes the responses out of the hands of elected officers and gives them to the management team that has management skills and management training, where decisions can be made most productively and most efficiently for the benefit of the residents of the city. So Brody, as our emergency manager, would you bring us up to date on where we are with the COVID-19?
Sure. So in your packet, I've got what was the latest copy of the management document for the COVID-19 pandemic. I've been giving the council almost daily updates on that. So the only thing different from the document in the packet that was sent out last week is I believe we've closed playgrounds and we've restricted any city-sponsored travel outside of Davis County. One thing I want to, I guess, go over for the benefit of the public too is, so the city manager acts as the emergency management director during times of emergency. The reason for that is because of a lot of times in an emergency, we do not have the luxury of time to debate in a public setting. And so there's recognition for that. And the powers of the emergency management director are temporary in nature. And under our policy, the elected officials still have ultimate power. So the emergency management director can be removed by the mayor. And so there is still that ultimate power vested in our elected officials. One thing that I'm not going to go through the management document. I assume you've read it, and that's what I want to talk about. If you have any questions or concerns or anything, but just a little bit of background on March 12th. This was during the time when the surge in number of cases started to go up in Italy, and it was starting to become prevalent, mainly on the eastern seaboard and western seaboard of the United States. I rounded up department heads to an EOC meeting so that we could discuss what I saw was an imminent and oncoming threat to the city. And so that was our first day as a emergency operations center. And we began discussing all of those things in the management document on that day. I do want to focus on what the goals are for the city. So first, we want to reduce and slow the spread of the virus amongst the public. We want to reduce the risk of virus exposure to our employees. We want to maintain our operations of the city as much as possible. So that is one of our goals right now, is to keep running. And then we want to assist the county and state agencies in the management of this emergency, particularly the health departments. There's the state health department and the county health department. And we want to support the decisions that they're making along with the governor. And then finally, our final goal is to maintain security of commerce in the city. And so we've made some plans for that. So everything that we've done so far and what's in that management document is based on those 5 goals. And so that's the purpose of all the actions we've taken. But what I want to do today, because we've had to take action, we haven't had time to discuss it amongst the council. We wanted to put it on the agenda tonight so that if there are questions or concerns, we don't want to go too far out of the way if we're getting, out of step with what the elected officials want. So we just want to check in and see how this is going. So I'll open it up for questions.
Jordan, you want to lead us off here?
Sure. As I read through this, I think we're doing the right things. I am also very grateful that we have the ability and are in the position to not have layoffs. I would like to try and, as best we can, keep things open without putting people at risk. As I read through the plan, we've talked about doing remote work. I think the big thing I want to make sure that we do is keep the city functioning and keep as many people employed as we can, because we don't want to adversely affect our economy or any economy around us. And honestly, it's just all about the lives of those people who are putting in a lot of effort for the city. So I'm grateful we've been able to do this. I think this is a good plan, and I want to thank Brody and his staff for taking the time to put this together, to watch out for not only the citizens of the Syracuse, but also the staff that are helping keep us safe. So I think this is well done, and thank you, Brody, for your efforts.
I'm going to take you in the order that I see you on my screen. Dave, you're next. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I shared with Brody earlier that I'm a little concerned that we have that we've gone as far as we have without involving the council as much as I feel like it should have happened. This is a very different emergency. This is not like the kind of emergency where a disaster that we rush out and we start serving or servicing the challenges. This is kind of a lingering long-term. I use the term passive disaster because it seems to linger and go on. I feel like in this situation, we need to use the tools that we have to be able to gather the council for discussion. I'm not objecting to some of the ways that things have been handled, but if we leave out the elected body from the people, then it opens the door to me in future situations to where they could say, well, we're just going to call this a disaster for the next month and do whatever we want. I don't think that would be right. I don't think that's happened, but I think that we have to be cautious of what precedent we set.
Thank you, David. Corinne?
Yes, my two thoughts are, first of all, if you're at risk, please stay home. Please make arrangements for someone or some delivery system to bring things that are needed to your home, but do not put yourself at risk. That quarantine really needs to be taken more seriously now that numbers are rising. And if you are in that higher risk profile of either elderly and or have some sort of immunocompromise due to other risk factors like heart disease, diabetes, respiratory problems like the CDC has been recommending, please stay home. And please actually don't allow visitors to come. But then secondly, I do think it is important that we allow as much business to happen as we can, because the economic fallout from this is going to be huge. And we're already starting to see it. I know of a couple of people who've already lost their jobs. So if we can allow business to still go on somehow, for instance, we order pizza and leave it, get money or, order stuff to come to our house, and we pay them well to come. Any sort of business that we can still do, I think is really important for a lot of people who are suffering financially. Those are my two thoughts.
Thank you, Corinne. Seth?
Hi, so just a few thoughts. I think the staff are doing an excellent job of keeping us apprised of their efforts, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. Some of my questions are around, are we seeing, maybe from Chief Adkin or Brody, if you could maybe fill us in on whether we're seeing upticks in crime, property, or DV or anything like that we're seeing in other locales statewide. And then also some thoughts around, have we seen interruptions in services? I know that obviously changing the scheduling and the ability for citizens to come in to access services, have we seen impacts on that? Can you maybe speak to that, Brody?
Sure. So I know as far as access to services at, administrative offices and things like that, haven't received any complaints on anything. A lot of the business has died down, I think, just by choice of people not wanting to go out. But we have been receiving appointments here in City Hall. People are doing their payments online or over the phone, for utilities and building permit stuff. People are making appointments. So that is continuing, and I think it's operating well. As far as any crime or public safety issues, the last report I received, there didn't seem to be anything significant. I don't know if Chief Atkin, if you're available to speak to that, if there's any updates to that in the last day or two.
Sure. We're not seeing any increase in crime in any one particular category or anything like that. In fact, the patrol officers on the street, their comment would be that things seem to have slowed down, and after 7 o'clock at night, the city's kind of rolling up the carpet. So we seem to be doing pretty well right now, and the community's been very understanding with some of the limitations.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Seth. Lisa?
Yes. I don't know, is my picture going to come up or do I need to click on anything here? Anyway, okay.
I can see ya.
Can you see me? Great.
Yeah.
I can't see myself. That's probably best. You know, I remember last year when I was reading about what would happen in an emergency situation, when I was reading our Utah League of Cities and Towns book and finding out what protocol was. And I saw that Brody had an incredible amount of burden that would be placed on him. And I never thought that I'd see the day that it actually came to fruition. And I just want to publicly state how grateful I am to feel completely confident in those who are in charge in emergency situations. I didn't once question whether Brody or our chiefs or anybody who is in that realm of being in charge of emergency response. I haven't questioned their competence or their abilities, and I'm really grateful that our staff is so incredible that we can count on you to do exactly what needs to be done. I am not trained in this, and I am grateful to have a city manager and staff members who have been trained in this, and especially with a city the size that we have now, we're not just a little town anymore. So also, this is a multifaceted pandemic issue. It's not just the health. We're talking about hope. We're talking about normalcy. The kids that are all home from school have this feeling of everything being surreal. And so we can't just address this in terms of quarantine and everybody stay home. There are things to come that have to be addressed. And so I agree with everything that's been done thus far. I think it's not just, as I said, not just the health situation that is crucial and urgent, but also hope and economy and domestic issues, schooling for these kids who have just lost their senior years and all the normalcy in their lives. So anyway, I believe that we have handled it beautifully, that our personnel have done just exactly what they should have. They've been listening to the state and going with protocol there. And so I just want to let you know how grateful I am for your efforts and that we are in very competent hands.
Mayor,
Yes.
I don't know if you can see Seth and Dave have both raised their hand to talk. And then we also have a resident in the meeting, Whitney Lee. She was the one that had the public comments earlier, is raising her hand to speak. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that if you want to recognize her.
I can't see that, Cassie. So if you'll help me with you presenting, I can't see hands.
Okay, yeah. So right now, Seth and Dave, and then if you want to allow a resident to speak as well.
Okay. Seth and Dave, Dave, would you begin? And then Seth, and yes, I'd like to recognize Whitney because of the
Seth was first. I'll let him go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. So my comments were actually for Whitney as well, just to kind of ask in regards to Jensen Pond and what we're doing. Just having gone by Steed Pond in Clearfield, it looked like a semi-festival out there. I haven't been by Jensen lately, but just want to kind of get some updates on that.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. It's a fine line we have to walk here on this. We have closed the bathrooms. We've tried to minimize the surface area where germs are likely to spread, where the virus is likely to spread. So normally we would be, at Jensen, we would have the bathrooms open, but we would just be ready to open all the other bathrooms in all the parks. And we're going to continue to close those to minimize the surface area of what people could pick up. So as far as the park itself goes, we're trying to just educate people to practice social distancing while they're recreating. The governor's directive that came out on Friday actually encourages people to get out and recreate. They don't have to stay in their home. But when they do recreate, to stay 6 feet away from each other, so that they can get out and get fresh air, stay healthy, without being exposed to the virus. So for the time being, unless things go sideways here in Utah, for the time being, we're going to try to keep the parks open so that people have a place to go while they still can. So the risk in Davis County isn't by the health department. It's not considered high enough that we should be closing parks yet. And if we all do our part, it'll never get bad enough to where we have to close our parks. And so right now it's at a phase where we're trying to rely on everybody to just focus on their behavior.
Thanks, Brody.
David?
What Brody's bringing up is exactly my concern with how we should be more involved in doing things, because the number one thing that is missing right now, in my opinion, is communication with the public and communication with what we should and shouldn't be doing. I mean, several of us have been on the calls with the governor where he's briefed members of ULCT and talked about what the plans are. So we've heard him say things like, you should get out. But it is also going to be the responsibility of the public to keep their distance from each other while they're out. And, you know, that's an education thing that we should be able to help with as officials, getting that message out. I've put a couple of posts out, probably not nearly enough information, but we should be talking as a council about what we need to do to help educate people for those things. Again, we've put out some other information about things that you should and shouldn't be able to do. That's the most difficult part of this, I think, right now, is communicating with people to help them understand. I've seen some people try to shame others for being outside of their home, when in fact, there is evidence that sunlight and fresh air is going to help you in the long run stay healthy and keep away from some of these things, as long as you stay away from other people and things that are commonly touched. And, you know, so we have to, we're going to have to discuss this and kind of do the things that we can do. I am going to throw out this caution, though, as far as I have no problem hearing from a citizen on this. It's certainly an immediate concern for people, but I want to be very cautious with our change in meeting format. We do not generally just engage the public and comment for things that are not a public hearing, and we need to keep to our own rules. If we want to open it up on this item, that's one thing. But if we start opening that door, there's always been a consistency issue of where people start to say, hey, I just want to chime in on your public meetings, and we have to be careful.
Thank you, Dave. As we planned this meeting, my instructions to the staff were on this one item. I feel it critical enough that I would allow public comment on this item and this item alone. My responsibility is to control the meeting, but I feel like if there are questions from the public on this particular item, that we would entertain those. Whitney, if you would like to speak. Cassie, does she have a microphone?
Yeah, she should. And then also Corinne has raised her hand if you want to recognize her after Whitney.
And I have
and
seen Jordan. Yeah, I'm good. I can see
Okay.
those now. They were
Okay.
behind a panel.
Okay.
So I do work as a disability rights and mental health advocate, and I also am a high risk person. So kind of my life depends on kind of following the science, and I am grateful for the response, but I think I am also concerned that due to how media has reported that people with underlying conditions and elderly are more at risk, it sort of has written us off and has put the economy as more important than human life. The thing is we're told to self-isolate, just us to self-isolate as much as possible. But if we're those at high risk are the only ones that self-isolate as much as possible, that showed it really doesn't doesn't completely decrease your chances of getting the virus, especially if you live with other people who do have to work outside the home or are low income and are on SNAP and can't have groceries delivered. vice versa. So I am concerned about the disabled and high-risk residents in Syracuse City, and that their lives are not, and because right now, like the United States, we do have resources that weren't available during the Great Depression. So I'd like to know what is the city doing to be to reach out to those that are those who are disabled or high risk.
Brody, would you address that?
Sure. Yeah, I think you make some valid points, Whitney. So I know that a lot of the businesses within the community, at least like grocery stores and stores like that, are they've made specialized hours for shopping for those who are at higher risk. And, just to kind of give them a little more space and time away from the general public. And we're hoping that Smith's and Walmart are continuing to do that in our city. But as far as, any other actions the city's taken, the broad actions that we've taken have actually been meant to for everybody to be a little safer. So for example, when we close administrative offices, they're only by appointment only. That's because we can regulate how many people are in the building at one time. And that's not just, and that does help everybody, but it particularly helps those of high risk because they can distance themselves. They don't have to be in a place that where there's a lot of people. And then, any kind of, recreation program, we've just disbanded. We've canceled a lot of recreation programs, and the reason for that was we didn't want the children who associate with each other to bring home, the virus to those who are at high risk. And so even though some of our actions may be focused on those who aren't even at high risk, like our under 18 population, it is for the benefit of those who are at high risk. And that's one of the primary goals we actually had in our management document.
Brody, I'm wondering if in Whitney's case and cases like hers, whether our disaster preparedness group, if they were to call the city, then we could make contact with the city is divided into 5 different districts to serve the needs of the residents in 5 different districts with a captain that is over each of those districts. Perhaps we could make that individual aware, and maybe in that district there could be something done that might help someone that is in Whitney's situation.
Yeah, and if there are special needs that are unique to whatever situation a person is in, I think that's a good route to go, and I think that's where we can start the conversation. If there are unique specific needs that can't be accommodated through any broad measures, yeah. I think that's possible.
Maybe we could communicate that to the residents too.
Yeah,
that's okay. A venue. That's something we could do. Okay, thanks, Whitney. Corinne?
I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, that the health departments of each county, they are in charge of the directives for the county according to what they're seeing with the numbers and so forth. So it's under their directives that the cities and all of us as residents are told how to behave, because our situations in Davis County are very different than, say, like Daggett County. And so it's the health department who directs that and tells us what we need to do as far as like business closures and for instance, closing all the restaurants and bars as they did direct. And then secondly, I do want to say thank you, Brody, for those suggestions, and Mayor for directing that, for identifying people who might have needs. But I do want to say that the number one thing that does help with any sort of pandemic is quarantining. So it's the only way that you can prevent from being exposed to other people. There's no guarantee otherwise, especially if things are aerosolized, which they're possibly suspecting with this. So, but I do appreciate the fact that there might be ways to contact individuals with higher needs. I definitely agree with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. Jordan?
Sure. So a couple of things. This is actually one thing that confused me a little bit as we were going through all of this, is at the onset of this, what am I going to call it, sickness, we had the Disaster Preparedness Committee. We actually asked each of the districts to contact the various areas and have them contact all of those high-risk people. And so we had gotten that underway, and then a Facebook post from the police department came out saying not to allow anyone to go door to door. And so we actually were stopped midway through that. And so we were in the process of attempting that, Whitney, but I think it got to the point where we were kind of breaking quarantines by knocking on doors. And so I understood why they did it, but just know that's one of the things that we were struggling with, is we did make an attempt to reach out to everyone that was at risk, but in doing so, there was a risk that was involved in contaminating those very same people with additional people knocking on their door. So it's kind of a catch-22 where by going out and visiting all these people, we're putting them at risk. So please know that we have not forgotten about anyone, but the mere act of visiting each of those people is putting them at risk. And so where we don't have a lot of the contact information, it's there are no white pages anymore. Most people's cell phones are not listed and things like that, and we don't keep track of the various citizens' ages specifically. And so we're kind of at a disadvantage there, but please know that we are divided into districts and areas, and every area has a coordinator that is in charge of helping you. And if you don't know who that is, you can go ahead and contact me, and I could probably find out who your coordinator is. Again, my name is Jordan Savage. Feel free to reach out to me. I can get you in touch with your local area coordinator. A lot of people also know them as wards, if that helps. And we can figure out where you are, and we can get you whatever you need from your area. I'd also note that both Smith's and Walmart, in addition to, I know some businesses do have specific hours, but they also do pickups where they will just put the groceries in your car. You can pay in advance, and they'll just throw it in the back of your car. So I would recommend taking advantage of that. And so there are lots of resources. We don't want anyone to think that we've forgotten about them, or that we're ignoring them, or that we are intentionally putting them at risk. But I do agree with Dave in the fact that the best thing we can do with a lot of people is just get out of doors. I think I've seen our fire chief more times in the past 2 or 3 weeks just in random parks than usually I see him once or twice a month, but I just keep bumping into like lots of people that I don't normally see. And by bumping in, I mean, obviously we were 6 feet apart and had no contact. But yeah, we are trying to manage that, and we do want people to get outside. So I also recommend against shutting down the parks, but we do recommend that people stay safe. And lastly, Dave, your background is cool, but the fact that your head and arms keep disappearing whenever you start talking, really disturbing. See, your shoulder just disappeared. The background is cool, but it's a little disconcerting.
Jordan,
and that's all I have. That's all the comments I have on that.
Thank you for your work with that disaster preparedness group. It's been a great strength that was begun by the former mayor, and it is a strength. Now, Brody, do you have any closing statement that you'd like to make to the public?
No, I mean, I do just want to clarify what was going on there last weekend with the 5 districts and contacting. The instruction was put out, I believe it was a Friday, to go out and contact everyone over the age of 60 that they are aware of. We did not specifically ask to go out and contact people that have any known comorbidity or disability, because you know, of protection of personal information, and that's stuff that the city doesn't even have data on anyway. But what we did have data on was we knew that through the districts, they knew of people that were approximately 60 years old or older, and they could reach out to them and had contact information for them. And so I think it was around Tuesday or Wednesday. So the instruction was to try to get that done by Sunday. I know that was a quick turnaround, but we knew we had a short window to do it. By Wednesday, we had received reports. This wasn't in our city, but it was beginning to happen, where people were knocking on doors, particularly to seniors, asking them or telling them that they could basically advise them on what they need and didn't need for this pandemic, and that they would ask if they could go in and see what kind of supplies they have in their house, and people would, you know. So the concept here is they're casing the house possibly to commit a crime. And so what we didn't want to do is confuse people with legitimate outreach by the city and possible nefarious activity going on out there in the community. So we thought the risk was not worth the reward at that point by Wednesday. So we had Officer Beam contact all the 5 district leaders by phone and through text to discontinue that. And so it was an abrupt end, but there was a specific reason for that.
Thank you, Brody. Dave, I see you have a comment.
So beyond just advising where we are and getting us all up to speed, I think that we need to talk a little bit about what our next steps are, and whether we make that decision tonight or not. I just want to throw out the idea that in a disaster, we all have roles as council members to be an active part in helping get through this. So maybe even if we had a regular briefing time set up, there are provisions that allow us to have emergency meetings without lots of extended public notice. And if we have to put, Cassie can certainly advise us as to what the limitations are there, but we probably need to be more active in how we can help and support and do our part.
Thank you, Dave. We'll look into that. Just for the public's benefit, I have attended every EOC, been part of every communication that's come from any part of the EOC. So it isn't without some direction. I'm going to move us on because of the economy of time, but thank you. We appreciate your input. Whitney, thank you for taking time to be with us. We really appreciate that effort. I know it's a tough effort for you. Let's move on and discuss item D. Noah, can you give us just a real quick update?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, let me share the screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So we're familiar with this. This, for anybody listening that isn't, this is just this. Can you see my mouse too? My hand?
Yep.
Good. Just south of Smith's, there's a field. It's 3 acres. The plan, as you're familiar with, had some issues last time. The applicant has modified his plan. The first issue was that we didn't have front elevations of these rear units here. And the next issue was that this driveway right here from here to here was longer than 150 feet, and which doesn't meet fire code. Anything over 150 feet has to have a fire apparatus turnaround that's approved by the fire department. So they fixed that, and they provided us front elevation. So the applicant wants to get your input. The applicant is also on the meeting. If you do have questions, he could be unmuted, called on that way. However, one thing I'll point out that the applicant's aware of too is when they fix this, then all of a sudden this one is longer than 150 feet. So, you know, that's something that would have to be fixed. Other thing I think I should bring up based off of some of the public comment is 1000 West. Question about the spacing there. So 1000 West is on our master transportation plan as a collector. And if you come here to our standard drawings here, it's a 66-foot right of way, and it has, see C right here, pavement width. It's 45 feet. And so usually a drive is about 12 feet. So you have two ways, 24 feet. So until there's paint or something on there with the center turn median, there is a shoulder room for things if there was somebody that wanted to park there, but most likely they would come into here. And as far as parking, if you look at the table here, we've looked at the parking. So parking is in our off-street parking ordinance, PRD. You have 2.5 minimum per dwelling unit. There's 28 units, so there's 70 required stalls. If you look here, they have 4.29 stalls per unit. So they have plenty of parking per our ordinance. One recommendation though is that these 19 and 18 foot drives, that's actually some good input, I think, would be to recommend that these are 20 feet driveways here. They have plenty of room back here. So that's 35 feet. There's plenty of room that could be pushed that way. So as far as the road and the parking, staff doesn't necessarily have a concern. Obviously there will be traffic impact. They will have, once these are built, with the building permit, the city will be collecting impact fees for traffic impacts. And moving on to the architecture, these are the latest drawings from the applicant. Now's your time to comment on your feelings about the colors and the architecture and the style. So along 1000, these will be rear fed garages, and then there'll be a second. So this is the east side. So this is the rear. And then the one's interior, the second row, will be front loaded. And the reason why they're front loaded is so that the front doors don't face the back of Sunset Park Villas. So they all face towards their all of the garages will be right there on the shared driveway, and the entrances will face towards the road as well. So yeah, now's your chance to comment on the architecture and the plan. As far as the layout goes, and I've been checking the setbacks and things. Those are the concerns that I had. Just a recommendation to increase that depth. But as far as open space and amenities, they meet the ordinance that way.
Council, would you like to hear from the applicant before we begin discussion?
Sure.
Cassie,
Yes,
can you?
please.
All right, can you hear me? This is Nate Swain.
Hello, Nate.
How are you guys? This is actually a pretty efficient way to do this meeting. I kind of like this. We often. The first, to address the oversight on the distance there on that north drive aisle. Not sure how we ended up with 153 feet. As you can see, we still have plenty of room to shimmy those buildings around and move everything down. That's not a problem. We'll address that and have a revised plan prepared so that it's in your packet for the actual business meeting to vote on that. So what you vote on is approvable. As far as the elevations, share with me, well, actually, before we get that, the amenities, let's talk amenities real quick. After we put the pickleball courts on this site, I had many comments about how many pickleball courts there are out there, and that might be a waste of resources, and that it might be preferred to have open space for people to run around rather than have a mess of a pickleball field. Can you guys just give me some direction there? Give me a comment on what your thoughts are about the pickleball courts and the setups or setup that I have for amenities.
I
have no issue with the pickleball courts. I don't think they're overdone because they don't actually exist. We've heard them promised a lot of times, but they're not actually here yet.
I think the pickleball courts down on the south end look great, and I think that they will be appreciated because, like Dave just said, we don't have any in Syracuse yet. Hopefully they're coming, but we don't have any yet, and I think the more the merrier because it's a very popular sport.
Okay, there's two.
The only thing, this is Seth, the only thing I was thinking about, and I've never played pickleball before, but the only thing I was thinking was, can balls travel into the roadway there, or are there going to be kids chasing balls there versus the east side where they were previously?
They'd have to be fenced.
You know, I would like that to be fenced, just simply from the perspective of having little kids in this area. It's some place for them to play and for parents to cut them loose and just let them go. So all of that area there is going to be fenced in, as it'll be contained, as well as the area by the tot lot. That the little teeny square there, it's so small it's hard to read, but that will be a little gazebo area that will be big enough for 3 picnic tables so that moms can go over, or dads, or whoever. They can go over, sit under the canopy there, have lunch, let the kids play in the tot lot, run around in the open space. And then that will be in concert with the open space and the pickleball courts to the south. So I anticipate that it will all be closed and contained so that kids have some free space there.
So I have a question then. It looks as if the pickleball courts will only be accessible to the condo unit residents. Is that correct?
Correct.
So in my opinion, then I don't see the necessity of having a couple of them if it's closed off. It's one thing if it was going to be an asset to the entire community, which I understand that it doesn't need to be. But I don't think it's necessary then to have 2 courts going for so few residents. If there's something else that you wanted to put there, if there's something else that would be more feasible or something that could be a better use of amenity space, then I don't think it's necessary to have the 2 courts. It's one thing if it's going to be, as I said, an asset to everyone and we could have people going onto the property. And again, I understand that that can't be the case. So if that isn't the case, I think we can open it up to any other option for an amenity that would make better sense or be another, a different opportunity for an amenity for your residents.
Okay.
Keep in mind.
I'm along those. Go ahead, Dave.
Just keep in mind that he can meet the requirement with the tot lot and 1 court. Having 2 is better, and I appreciate his willingness to put another one in, whether it's just for those folks or not. Dropping 1 doesn't mean that he has to add a 3rd amenity.
Right. And I honestly, the question is more from a practical perspective of what do you want to see? I had one mom that I showed this plan tell me, hey, in a place that we lived there, and this was kind of a weird request, but she said we had a concrete path all the way around the outside of the open area, and it was used for kids to just get on their bikes and pedal around and literally have just kind of a lap circuit that they could get some energy out. So, you know, if that would work, I'm happy to add things like that. I just didn't want the pickleball courts cost more, and the real issue is they cost more to maintain. So if that's overdoing it, and there are other pickleball courts in the city, I think it's a fun amenity to be on the site. But if it's not necessary to have two, I'd rather put something else that will be used and not duplicate that expense.
I agree.
Just on this subject, though, I think you have to keep in mind that we had done some research a few years back when we were looking at different park options. And whenever you do just one of something, you run the risk that people see somebody out there and then it's like, okay, there's one court and somebody's on it. If you have at least two, then you get more of a chance that people rotate through because there's an open court available, and maybe those people don't stay for the whole time, but you're not constantly chasing people off. That seemed to be an issue with any court, whether it be basketball, volleyball, whenever there's just one, if it looks occupied, you then, you know, kind of, you run people off. So.
Well, I can see that being an issue if we're talking about a public space, but in this case, we're talking about a residential area that belongs to the residents. So I don't think that there's going to be so much a case of, oh, I won't go there and I won't recreate there because it looks like it's filled. I think they can look out their windows or take a look out their back door to see when an opening is, and maybe they'll want to do something where they sign up for times or something. But I think it's very different when we're talking about an enclosed area as opposed to an open to public area.
Lisa, I hear you say one. Seth?
I was fine with two as well.
Corinne?
If you don't do any pickleball courts, is there another option that you're talking about, Nate, or is that?
Well, no, I think that we would still do a pickleball court. I from what I've heard, that's an amenity that people really enjoy. They like doing that. And I think especially with the scale, that's something that's really easy and cheap for families to buy a couple of rackets and out playing, or it's easy for kids to go and do that. It's an easy sport. So I think at very least we would have one, but I'm just wanting your opinion on one versus two. And I think if we didn't do a second one, we'd try to, even though we don't need to, we've got the space. I'd like to put something else in there that would be an amenity that the residents would enjoy.
Lisa says one, Seth says two. Corinne, do you think two or one?
I'm on the neutral on this. I don't really care. I'm sorry, that's pretty.
Well, I appreciate that input. I know that technically one complies. Let me look into it and just see if we can get some more data on what the capacity is. I don't want to add an expense to the facility if it's not going to be used. If both aren't going to be used, it just costs more to resurface them, maintain them, etc. So we'll look into that, and in the final plan that we get back to you, we'll have some reference to that. I just wanted to comment.
I do have to.
Oh, yes, I'm taking my turn. Sorry, I'm cutting you all
You're fine.
So I wanted to talk a little about this simply because I am in favor of, I like the idea. I agree that if I walk up and see that one's being used, I'm just going to walk away and I'm not going to sit there and peek out a window. I do like the idea of having an amenity-rich community simply because I think it helps it to hold its value. One of the issue I always have with these smaller, denser units is we want them to hold value and continue to be an asset to the community. I think amenities do that. You can get a bunch of townhomes pretty much anywhere, but to have one that has a tot lot, some open space, some pickleball courts, if you want to put a loop or a track around it, I think the only thing this is going to do is add value to these townhomes. And I think that's in everyone's best interest to have something that holds its value. I love how you've added additional parking on the private roads, some little It'll help the teenagers get some practice with some parallel parking, which is always needed. And to address the concern about deliveries.
Wait, that's what churches are for, just to clarify, Jordan.
That is so
Practice
true.
No,
right
So
in the
true.
subdivision.
All right, that's not parallel parking though. But anyway, that I want to address the concern that was brought up on 1000 West. I want to point out that 1000 West is a very long road, and any house along this entire road would have that same issue with a delivery truck. You can't point fingers to this and say there's nowhere to put a delivery truck, because the houses anywhere along this road would have the exact same issue. And I think it's somewhat disingenuous to pin it on this development that says they can't get deliveries, because it's an issue that exists along the entire road. So I just want to make sure I address that.
They would have a driveway that they could pull in on.
No,
I've never seen a UPS pull into a driveway.
in fact, I drive that. That's a road by my home, and I've seen the UPS trucks all along it for all the years that they've been doing. I want to be clear though on my point. I'm not suggesting we get rid of one of the pickleball courts and not replace it with something else. I'm suggesting that we leave it open to another option if there is another one that would make it more rich with amenities, because three options is better than two, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we'll look into that. I'm 100% on board with providing amenities. I want people to be able to come here and see their kids being able to run around, have freedom. I mean, the homes are smaller. The living space is not as big as in a single family. So what you've got to do is offset that with outside recreation options. And that's kind of what we've tried to do, is give them a bit of a variety of things to do on site without having to go somewhere else.
Council, can I steer us back to elevations? And Nate, do you have enough direction on
No,
amenities?
that's perfect. Thank you.
Let's talk elevations.
I think they're fine as you look at them. I don't love the style myself, but again, not everyone thinks like me. I would prefer more rock as opposed to tan brick, because I don't like tan brick, but I'm not the one going to be moving in here. So I think these look like they're well designed. If it were me, I'd do it differently, but you know what? Someone else would do it differently than me. So I actually think these look like they look nice. They have good durable materials. I appreciate the fact that the lower level has a lot of the brick, just because I like brick, and the various textures and things like that. I think it has a very appealing look to it.
I'm going to just chime in and say that I don't, whether I like this or not, I don't know that it's really our opinion to say what's beautiful and what's not. It's professional,
Exactly.
It's clean, it's done. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, I'm not going to chime in and say, hey, you got to change this to purple, because that's not our call.
Corinne?
I really like what he's done. I like his changes. I like the colors too. It's warm. It's got some good variation, but not too much. And especially when it's shown with the trees like it is, they look really nice. I
I think
appreciate
this
it.
will be a good development.
Seth?
Yeah, no issues.
Okay.
No
Lisa?
issues here.
I think it's beautiful. I think, just like you said, everybody has a different opinion about aesthetics, but what we have here is a very solid and appealing residential area. And I like all of the textures, all of the different elevations, and the facade is really lovely. So I think, and they've used nice materials.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, Noah, do you have enough information now?
Yes, sir.
Can we take this to a vote on our business
Well,
meeting?
So what we haven't talked about is safety. And I mean, well, I guess we've touched on it, but I still am concerned about that. I don't think that I just don't think that this safely fits there. Again, it's not a matter, I mean, there's a difference between meeting the letter of the law and doing what's really good and safe. I think that if there's a emergency with a property towards the rear, they're going to have trouble getting in and out of there. I think that there's, I'm concerned about the safety of this project. And I think that it's why smaller PRDs don't work well. That's
And so,
just my opinion. And if I'm the only one that votes against it for that reason, that's fine.
yeah, I'll be looking at all of the reports from the staff, and one of those will be the fire marshal. If he has an issue with it, I have an issue with it. But if he doesn't, I don't.
Corinne?
I think that it's ready to go, and the reasons that have been brought up about safety, they're being addressed by the fire marshal and by national standards for the roads and everything. I don't see how, if we say no to this, it becomes undevelopable for anything.
Thank you. Seth?
Yeah, I just don't want to be any more restrictive than the fire marshal, but to Jordan's point, I'd love to just see that feedback from the fire marshal and then the adjustment that Nate's going to make on the extension on the north side. As long as that doesn't exceed the 150 feet and it's deemed safe, I'm okay with it.
Okay. Lisa?
I think there are a few things to address here. First of all, right next to that, with approximately the same amount of property, are 20 units, and this unit is 28, and I don't think that's excessive in any way. I also want to bring into account that we do have professionals, all of our chiefs and those who really are concerned with our roads, with our infrastructure, with our emergency preparedness and response time. They will be looking at this. This isn't something that we're taking lightly. Also, I think it needs to be mentioned that we tend to suggest that everybody leaves and everybody comes at exactly the same time, which sounds frightening when you say that means 70 more cars or 60 more cars on the road, immediately. But all you have to do is take a look into regular neighborhoods, and you see that not every car leaves or comes at the same time. And so to suggest that we're going to have a great exodus and a great incoming at the same time of day, every day, all day long, is just not, it's disingenuous to suggest that that's how a neighborhood works. And so, of course, safety is something that we're looking at, which is why I said I don't want there to be any access whatsoever suggesting that this PRD or this development connects to another one, or that their amenities are considered this property's amenities. We would never want to suggest that residents or children especially would go unaccompanied to another property that was across a main road to get there. I think that we have a really typical area across the street from this, are condos as well with the same kind of density. We don't have issues with we're just not going to do something that makes it impossible for emergency response to come there. I think that we're going to be careful about this, and we all have been careful about our density here, and it is undevelopable if we don't do something similar to this. So I think we're addressing those issues.
Thank you. I think we're close enough. Noah, you have your direction, and Nate, I hope you've gotten some feedback. Cassie, would you put this on the agenda for April, our business meeting for a roll call vote?
Mayor, can I ask just one more thing?
Yes.
Can we possibly look at making those driveways that 20 feet? I do think that's a good suggestion.
I agree.
Did you
Yeah,
get
we
that?
can- The only thing that does is it pushes those buildings or the homes closer to the eastern property lot or property line. So
About how much more? I mean, what are they lengths right now?
Isn't that an ordinance already? That it has to be.
There's a wall there.
No, right, no, how long are the driveways presently?
18 and a half according to the drawing.
I can answer that. So yeah.
Thanks, Noah.
And the rear yard is 15 feet. And if you look at the drawing,
Yeah, it's like 30, so yeah.
Nate's also right. It will push that closer, but more like
It'd be 3 feet total.
2 or 3 feet. So yeah, double.
But on
It
the
might-
bright side, it was the representative of that community that actually requested that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
One
just-
thing we didn't mention though is that don't we have an ordinance that doesn't allow for the majority of the front facade to be garage?
Yes.
Because now in these back lots, it becomes almost entirely garage with a small front door.
But they're not facing the road. That's the
Yeah,
difference.
that's rear facing.
No, it's becomes the front facing if the front door is there.
Right, but they're not facing the road though. They're not on that,
But that
it's,
doesn't
the
matter
ordinance,
whether,
no, the ordinance goes along with what faces the road, Dave. It's the ordinance, like, so corner lots, for instance, if they're
Right,
on a
can
inside,
face
they
a
have to
main
turn
road.
towards the road. So all of them, is according to facing the road. This is an inside private drive, so that is not applicable there.
I've got the
How
ordinance
do you-
pulled up if you want to read it. I would consider it kind of interior, but it doesn't really, the ordinance doesn't specify that. It just says garages shall not be the major architectural feature of the building, and garages are encouraged to be recessed from the front facade or beside a rear fed. So they're doing the rear fed, which will really help what you see along 1000, but those interior
sure, wrong,
ones will.
but they become front fed for the back properties.
So the only other choice though is to, well, I guess they could change it's up to you guys, whatever you guys think.
I'm not well, okay, so the easy fix is you move the front door to the backyard, which doesn't make any sense, and I'm not suggesting you do that. But it is a problem with consistency, because what happens when somebody else applies and says, okay, now I want to avoid this ordinance?
No, the
Because-
ordinance says that the garages have to be off the road, Dave, and these are private drive. That is not applicable here. For instance, when other ones where we have 6 units on a little side feeder road, those units don't have to have the garages in their backyards. It's according to the road, the actual road that the public uses, and that's complying here.
So I'm going to chime in that on this specific, if we're purely talking letter of the law, I actually agree with Dave on this one, that as far as these buildings are concerned, our code technically would not allow these. It doesn't say nothing about it says nothing about a private drive.
Right.
But
This
where in the
is
ordinance does it say? Show me where in the
architecture.
ordinance.
It's in section I, architecture. Item 3 says garages shall not be the major architectural feature of the building.
And I don't
Garages
see
are
it.
encouraged to be
Yes.
recessed from the front facade or be side or rear fed.
So how are we deciding what side or rear is on this? Is it facing this road that's their private drive, or is it their backyard that isn't a road?
All I'm saying is the
For the pub-
ordinance doesn't address that. So I actually think they look fine, but I agree with Dave that technically, if we are just reading the ordinance, I think either we need to reword the ordinance to clarify, because someone could challenge this and say, this does not meet this part of the ordinance. I read it that way. And so I agree with Dave that if we are going to allow this, we might want to consider either tweaking the ordinance to clarify, or you run the risk of someone challenging it and they could technically be correct.
Well, if
Well,
we
that-
need to change or tweak our ordinance, that's one thing. But like, for instance, in the down by the ski lakes and stuff, those are front fed garages on those short driveways, and the ordinance was written in that time period for this as well. So the understanding was that it didn't have to be going around the backside of the building, so you had driveway clear around the whole thing.
Yeah, and I don't want that. All I'm saying is, if I'm following the letter of the law, there is room for argument.
So we need to change it to say on private drives that this is allowable, or that kind of clarification. Is that what you're looking for?
If that's the clarification that makes this work for you and you're okay with that, then yes.
But I
But
think
the
as
point
it
is
stands
that
right now, that we
As it
change
stands
that
right
for the
now, it's
future.
challengeable.
But I think that the understanding was, because of what we've already built, that this was the understanding that it was on the frontage road that where we didn't want the garages. That was the understanding from the very beginning on this. And that's why I was wanting to know where out in the ordinance you guys are talking. And so we all
Were you
had
able
the
to find it?
understanding of
Yeah.
where it needed to be. And so if we clarify it for future ones, I'm fine with that. But I think that what we've already built complies.
Okay, Seth, would you weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I read it as that the garage cannot be the major architectural feature of the building. And I do not see the garage as the major architectural feature of this building. I see it as a little less than half. I mean, that's not the majority. You see a lot more architecture on there besides the garage. You see the doors and the dormers and everything else. So I don't see it that way. I think it complies with it currently.
I think it's more
Lisa?
like, I'd say it's about a third. If we want to get into the nitty gritty here, I mean, you can say, we haven't said that you can't have a garage facing the street, because all garages that I know of besides mine faces the street. It's the vast majority of our city has a garage facing the street. So if we want to break this down into percentages, it would be pretty simple to say, here are our measurements, and this is about a third yeah, it's about a third of the makeup of that condo unit. So I see it as an issue.
Just for clarification, in previous meetings, Noah pointed out that we were only talking about width, side to side. We're not talking about the second story balancing with the front or the first story. We're talking about side to side of each unit. Is it a majority? We changed it because Andrea and I were the ones that changed this to say less than the majority, because we were talking about whether it should be 50% or 40% or 60%. We said just less than less than 50% was, not the majority, because we didn't want to get too specific and have somebody pull out 6 inches doesn't qualify here or something. So the point was that side to side, the garage cannot be the dominant part of the width of the house. And that was something Noah brought to the table. So Noah, if you want to tell us how this differs from specifically the Woodside development here, because it was about where it faces the road. Now, if you want to say private drives are not roads or shared driveways, to me, the difference is over there, when we talk about facing the side, it's because they share a driveway of less than 6 units. This is a private road, but it's not a driveway. There's too many units to call it a shared driveway.
And I can chime in. The biggest difference is this is the PRD zone and the other one was the master plan community zone. And so the requirements are a little bit different. And I think you guys bring good points to the table. I don't necessarily disagree with anything that's been brought up. I think you could argue that that is a big architectural feature. Given the alternative of flipping it around or, looking at it's hard to really write a lot of design into the ordinance because there's so many scenarios. And I don't know if this scenario was necessarily anticipated when the ordinance was written. The most important facade for the city is the one that faces the road, because that's what you really see as you drive through. And so I'm a big proponent of the rear and side fed. And if you look at the ordinance, garages are encouraged, not required, encouraged to be recessed from the front facade or the side or rear yard. So the front is rear, and then this one actually, if you were to look on this in plan, if I'm reading it right, this porch actually comes out in front of the garage. So you could argue that that's best. And then as far as major architectural feature, you heard it from Seth, you could argue that there's lots of other things on there that, not be the major architectural feature of the building. That's where, as a staff member, I'm looking holistically at this, and where it doesn't come out and say specifically, I don't think that there's a violation of the ordinance as far as how I'm reading it and in the spirit of the ordinance. We want to make sure that those garages are hidden from those major views, and they are, because they're on the second row. And the nicest facade is this, and this is what you'll see from the street. But generally speaking, you're right. I mean, if this was facing the street, that would be a less attractive building. But since it's the second row, and given that there's not really an alternate, and given the fact that it's kind of arguable, it's unclear, I don't think we need to amend the ordinance. I think that it's within kind of your discretion as council. If you had ideas of what you wanted the applicant. change, maybe now would be the time to give them some feedback.
So personally, I am fine with this as is, but I do think the ordinance needs to be clarified that that is specific to a public drive. On a private drive where you, like, I obviously don't want him to put the garages on the back because that would not work. I also don't want him to remove the garages because that also would decrease the value of it. So I really think that with it, I'm okay with it as is, but I do think the ordinance needs to be clarified such that that is not on a private drive, it would be allowable, and that would also probably should be added to the wood side as well, because looking at those also are non-compliant because they are a very large feature of that, and I wouldn't have approved the wood side.
Council, I'm going to move this on, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to survey the council for whether we move this on for a vote at our next business meeting. Lisa, would you support moving it on or holding it?
I support moving it on.
Jordan?
I would also support moving it on
David?
with us looking at the ordinance to clarify.
With us looking at the ordinance, okay. David?
I think we have to fix the ordinance.
Okay. Seth?
I'd support moving it forward with discussion around making sure that the elements that are we detailed right now have been addressed.
Okay. Corinne?
I would support moving it on with, again, just making sure everything's taken care of.
All right. Cassie, would you put that on the agenda for the April meeting, first April meeting?
Yes, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you, Nate. Thank you, council. I appreciate it. Let's move on.
Thanks.
Let's go on to item E, a discussion involving amendment number 4 to the interlocal agreement with the Davis County Animal Control Services. Paul, are you the setup guy for this?
That'll be Garrett.
Garrett, okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is a pretty standard one that we've done in past years. We've been working on this agreement with the animal control since 2016. This is the final year of our contract, and this basically just outlines our percentage of this contract city's 50% that everyone's responsible for.
Okay. Lisa, could you lead us out? Do you have questions? And let's talk this.
Yeah, I have no questions. I read through it. It's what I remember going through this last year as well. The only thing I would like to say for we're not too swamped with other business, is to consider how many times a call is coming in from one residence, because we're charged as a city every time that happens. And I would like to see there be a personal responsibility on the end of either the caller or the person that's being called on. Maybe some kind of a policy put into place where after so many, that we would let them know, of course, that every call is costing us this much money. And so if there is something that can be remedied and they're choosing not to remedy it, that there has to be room for us to find a way to refund the money back to the city, because I think that there are a lot of citizens just purely out of just a lack of knowledge don't realize how much money this is costing us every time they make a call.
Okay, thank you. Jordan, let's go back to you.
So mine isn't so much that someone calls, because I want people to be able to take advantage of the service. But if there is a perpetual offender, meaning they are consistently violating the law, I do think that they are the ones that should end up with some kind of a penalty. I know, I can't remember, it was last year or the year before, we had like 30 calls to one residence because they kept doing the same thing, even though they were asked to stop, warned, they had their animals taken away, they got more animals. I think in instances like that, where we have just repeat offenders that don't seem to care about their animals, that's not okay with me. And I think that there should be some way to recoup some costs from people that are just abusing animals and don't even care about their neighbors or the situation they're putting other people in. So other than that, I'm okay with this report. I think I've been very impressed at the level of documentation these guys do. I can't argue with anything. And so I want to thank them for doing such a great job. I've also talked to them, and they want to come out and present at Syracuse Days. They're willing to come out and do like an adoption clinic at our children's night at Heritage Days. So I think that's one thing I think we should look at. I've talked to Chris with that. That's besides the point. Overall, I think it's fair, and makes me amazed at how many times they come out to Syracuse. Dang raccoons.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, David.
It's all pretty much been said, and just to make a point on the record, we've talked before about what we could do to minimize calls and repeat calls. It seems there are limited abilities for us to address that because it's a master agreement that applies to all. It's really hard to isolate those incidences where and treat anybody different. I mean, we could get Paul to weigh in on that, but as of tonight, we're just continuing a contract that's already in place. So not much more to be said there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Corinne?
Just a couple things. As far as like repeat offenders, I know that when we were up there doing the tour, and this is one thing that the guy talked about, that animal hoarding, which usually ends up being abused because they can't take care of all the animals that they're hoarding, that ends up really being, it's actually a mental illness. And is there's any way that we can get those people referred for care or for treatment that might possibly help? I'm not sure how that could possibly involve the council in any way. It'd have to go through city officials and the county, but maybe a referral from animal shelters to the health department that, hey, we've got an animal hoarder that might need some social worker to get involved here to address their mental illness, because that's where a lot of those abuse type cases actually end up happening from. But I do think they do an amazing job, and unfortunately it's expensive, but we don't really have a choice. So
Seth?
Yeah, just a clarifying question on my end. I have no issues here other than it looks like from the memo it was about a 10% increase over the previous year when they had about a 35% decrease in the activity log. And is it always because they run a 2-year average? Is it a rolling 2-year average each year? Where they figure out the proportional share for the cities? Can somebody speak to that? Just not familiar with the contract.
So they basically have a contract with it where they say that we're responsible, the cities are responsible for 50% of the fees. So it's kind of like if the number of calls drop, it almost just costs more per number of call because they've still got to get the same 50%.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the personnel and operational costs and all that is fixed. It's just the share just fluctuates with the proportional city expense, and it's fixed anyway.
One thing we learned was a lot of the costs are in place, whether it's for 10 calls or 5 or 100 calls. A lot of the cost of the shelter and the facility and the staff are there no matter. So what it looks like per call, that's
not really an important metric.
Yeah, it's a false metric in many cases.
Okay.
It would look great if we had thousands of calls, and then we'd say, why do we have thousands of calls?
Council, it appears to me like we've got consensus to at least approve the interlocal agreement. Are you agree with that?
Yes.
Put this on a consent calendar?
Yes.
You good with that? Cassie, could
Yes.
you put that on a okay. Thank you. Let's move to item F, discussion of Flashpoint survey question regarding citywide spraying and cleanups. Brody, do you want to lead us into this one?
Sure. I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay, Cassie. Can I do that?
Yep, you should be able to.
Let's see. Okay. Oh, I thought I was already down there, sorry. So this survey, this would be the second survey under our contract. If you recall from last year about this time, the city
Looking for page
council,
36.
thank you. So about this time, the council we were discussing the Robinson contract for garbage collection. And one of the things the council indicated was, because we talked about the possibility of like a spring cleanup service. And there's different ways that can be done. And what we decided is maybe that's what we could ask the the residents for the next contract year. And so this would be something we could do to ask, to see if they want it, and if so, what type of cleanup would they want? And obviously cost is a factor. And then, whether they would want spring or fall or both. So if you want, I can go through each question, or if you're really familiar with them, we can just open it up for questions. How do you want me to proceed?
Let's go straight to questions. Unless somebody objects. So my first concern is, how are we impacted with our services because of the change in the landfill? And Mike probably needs to start off with that one. But if, for example, if you can't go on your own anymore, it may be more pressing that we get something done immediately. On the other hand, if we can't, what options are still there, and are these still applicable options? So help us out there, Mike.
Well, let me tell you where we are. There are 3 levels of concern up at Wasatch Integrated Waste. I sent you an email earlier this week telling you that last week telling you we had gone to level 2, which was that no cash interchange between the operator at the landfill and a resident coming and bringing a load. The director himself, with the governor's message last Friday, made a determination to go to level 3, which is only haulers with accounts. The executive committee, which I sit on, chaired by Bob Stevenson, we backed him off of that a little bit for about 24 hours. And then we met in a meeting with the Davis County Commissioner of Health, whose call it really is. And Nathan presented there, and we're back to level 3 right now, which means only haulers can enter the landfill. Now, I think, Brody, what you're talking about is something that wouldn't happen this spring, but maybe next fall or next spring, isn't it? Isn't that what the plan is?
That was the concept, and this was all getting put together prior to the virus pandemic. So, it is probably something that Robinson could put together pretty quickly, at least, by maybe, I don't know, maybe by May. But the idea was that we would survey and then decide from there, and then factor that into all of our budget discussions going into June when you adopt the budget. Because this one service, there's a cost associated with it, so we don't want to necessarily just discuss it in isolation. We want to discuss it in terms of cost of all of our utility services. So that was kind of the approach we were taking.
To be clear, is that closure just for during the interim of the pandemic? Mayor, you're on
Mike,
mute.
you're muted. You're still muted.
Jane appreciates me being mute. My guess is as soon as we see the curve flatten, that we'll go back to level 2 and it'll be credit cards only and residents only. They do accept waste from out of county, but the fees are higher for them.
He's frozen.
We won't accept anything. Can you hear me?
Now we
Yes.
can.
And you, it's likely to be, I'm guessing this will be 6 weeks and it'll be open.
Okay,
Based
so
on
that's-
what the baseline has been in other parts of the country, that baseline seems to be about 10 to 12 weeks. So I think when the curve starts to flatten, I think that there'll be the restrictions will be lifted. But the restriction is really being kind of imposed on Wasatch Integrated Waste by the county health officer.
Okay.
So getting back to your questions, Brody, I mean, realizing this is probably going to only apply to the following spring and not this spring. My biggest concern really centers around question 5, and that is when we talk about curbside pickup for additional items, I'm concerned that the cost would go high because it would involve manpower rather than just, I mean, I guess we'd have to decide what our options are there, because when you say maybe an additional pickup of the cans, then it's pretty straightforward. But if it's like you can bring things out to the curb, then we're talking manpower. I'm not sure that's cost effective. And I have a real concern with central drop off only because in my own neighborhood, we did that twice. And with the stipulation that we were doing this for, that we were going to group pay for something, you know, the dumpster wasn't even dropped off before people started dumping old furniture and when it was only supposed to be for green waste. So my question is not what happened in my situation, but how would we police this? Because if this is for anything, we're going to get all kinds of people's junk on an immediate basis that has nothing to do with spring cleanup. And I don't know how we would manage that. And it could become a really serious, you know, cost if we had to have multiple dumpsters daily.
Yeah. And that was one of the things we did discuss too. And I think we share the same concern. That they can, you know, residents can band together, like a neighborhood can band together and pay for a dumpster.
A dumpster, yeah.
A short-term dumpster. They can do that already. But we did talk about what if we had a series of dumpsters in different areas of the city, you know, over a weekend or whatever. So maybe we had some located at various parks and city buildings. And that was the big concern, was the enforcement of it, especially overnight. It you know, a lot of things can get dumped in the night. So
Yeah.
So we decided that maybe that wasn't even worth offering as an option. So that's why we came to the central drop-off service, which would actually be it would actually be staffed by public works employees. So they would actually coordinate people dropping stuff off and helping getting stuff into the dumpster.
So I was reading on question 3, it was a little bit vague. So I read through the questions and had other people read through them to try and see if they made sense to them. And as they read question 3 specifically, it almost sounds like there's going to be an extra garbage can that's coming, or if there isn't a garbage can, how would you know what day your day is? And if you miss it, are you going to have extra? And it just seems like it might be a hassle.
I wondered on that as well, if that meant garbage pickup or garbage can pickup. Was there an error in that question?
Yeah, it's meant to be a garbage can pickup. So basically,
You
what
can
that is,
we can have it dumped twice. Is that?
yeah, it's meant to be, and that was a way to keep it contained, so people, you know, people aren't
doing furniture.
Maybe twice a week for a period instead of once a week.
Yeah. So if you're doing yard work or construction or things like that, you can put that stuff in the can, but it limits it to what you can fit in the can so that the service is still fairly inexpensive and they can just pick it up with the arm.
Just another note on question 4. It looks like you've got an extra "and" in there.
I noticed that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hiding.
I just have to ask, is there a reason why we're doing this question? Because, it is pretty expensive overall.
To do the flash vote?
No, well, it's just about the garbage cans. I think if we're asking specifically about an extra garbage can at the residences, that makes more sense than having to police some sort of dumpster that's going to get all sorts of trash in it. But before, as a council, we kind of put this question aside because it was very expensive for the residents, but this is a lot more reasonable if we're doing like the can type of thing. Anyway, just wondering where the question came from.
Yeah, so there was kind of this decision or debate on, the type of service could be, if we do a central location, for example, if we put dumpsters down at Public Works, okay?
Right.
And we said on such and such Saturday, say, we pick a day on a Saturday, dumpsters are available at Public Works where you can bring in large items or yard waste or whatever you need to do and just put it in the dumpster. And then the other option was you didn't have to haul anything off of your property, because even if it's down at Public Works, you still have to put it in your truck or on a trailer and take it down to Public Works. The other option was, okay, maybe people might prefer not having to put stuff in their truck, but in order to keep it somewhat contained, that eliminates the possibility of a bulk item.
Right.
So and it wouldn't be an extra can, it would be their same can, but just twice in that week or, over a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
And if I need to go the trick with these surveys is to be clear but brief. And so
right. And I do appreciate the fact that you're providing education on realistic costs of this, but also alternatives to it. So I think it's good for the community to have choices, and you're doing education all at once. I think it's okay. It's good.
Yeah, and we did leave the option of both on question 5. So if people like the idea of, actually sometimes for bulk stuff, I'd like to go drop it off, here in the city instead of drive up to the landfill.
Well, one of the concerns.
So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. So one of my concerns with, this is we're trying to appeal to people who maybe don't have a truck or maybe don't have a means of hauling away their waste, but helping them get rid of it so that we do have a cleaner city. So I do understand that idea of curbside. I just worry about how we get rid of bulk stuff without it being a much bigger expense, because now you're dealing with manpower and not just the arm if it doesn't fit in the can.
Yeah, maybe I need to clarify on the survey, maybe not just call it curbside pickup, but maybe just call it extra garbage can pickup.
Yeah, because if you don't clarify that, then there's going to be that ambiguity of people saying, oh, can I drop off anything outside? Like a typical, that's a pretty common practice, right? Of these curbside drop-offs.
Put my couch on the curb.
Yeah, couch.
Throw the refrigerator out there.
2 TVs.
So Brody, if we get to a point where it looks like there's appetite for one or both or whatever, and next year we come around and prices increase, what's the protocol for something like that if it's a major hike?
So Yeah, council has full discretion, so we can discontinue, we can go out to bid again, we can, or we can continue it and pay the extra price. So,
Okay. I mean, that's one of the big complaints I keep hearing from everybody, just kind of those questions around why do my bills keep going up with the city for whatever purpose that is, whether it's sewer or garbage collection or anything.
yeah. Yeah, and that's something we always have to deal with. Our costs go up, right?
Sure.
And we can either eat it or pass it along to those who actually use the service.
Brody, when do you envision this going out?
So time frame. I'm gonna talk with the flash vote folks and see if they have any concerns with how this is worded, if they have some clarifications that they would recommend. We'll probably be putting it out probably later this month, probably within the next couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brody.
If you want a specific day, I don't have a specific day right now, but I can get that.
Okay. All right.
Cool. I like it.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on. Jordan, you brought up to the in a council meeting about recognizing youth outside of that, and the staff has asked me for some further clarification of what kinds of things and how that could be administered. Can we have a discussion on that? And Jordan, would you lead us out? You did
Sure.
the Rocket Boy, the Rocket Kids, but the staff needs some further definition and what kinds of things council's looking for.
So,
and how to, which departments are involved.
So I guess I was not looking for any specific support from staff other than as the schools or pretty much I'd like to get as many kids in there as possible. So for me, like I said, I wasn't looking for specific recognition from staff. My goal would be that if there is clubs that are doing something great, if there are kids that are, like STEM kids or athletic kids, anytime we have a team going to state or something like that, I would love to see them recognized. And I know this will make our council meetings, 5 to 10 minutes longer on probably a regular basis. But I think it's a great opportunity to get these kids recognition because, the chess club, the robotics club, the mathletes don't get a lot of recognition for the things they're doing. It's not often you see the cheerleaders at the mathlete club. And so I think this is an opportunity to try and recognize as many people as possible, and not just STEM kids, but also, I loved it when we had the Syracuse team that went and were championships. I loved having them in there. I loved having the whole team come in, get some pictures. So I guess as far as clarification, I don't think I have any other than I like to get as many kids in front of us as possible.
I guess the question of staff was how do we administer that? Some of you have assignments or liaisons with community councils. Who has their ear closest to the ground in the school setting? I know the CTC wants more recognition of kids that's meaningful, right, Corinne?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is right. Anybody that we can recognize, and I don't even think we need to do any sort of award. It's just having them come in, talk about what they did, shake their hand and say, good job, take their picture with them. And there you go. I mean, it's the act of actually recognizing them rather than having to give them something. But yes, that is a big deal. They want to do that.
Yeah, and so I think as far as how to administer that, I think it should be the liaisons to the schools.
Okay.
We ought to be asking in every single meeting, hey, do you have any kids that we can recognize this month?
What if we also put something in the newsletter in the magazine just asking about recognition for, acts of service of kids that maybe we don't hear by way of the school. I mean, good news is good news about anyone.
Okay.
I agree.
Here, can I just add something to the discussion?
Yes.
So the reason that I kind of had requested a little bit more clarification, more than anything, as staff, we want to make sure that we don't miss a request for something like this on the agenda. So it had come up a couple of times during closing discussion in a council meeting. And I don't think staff interpreted that as direction to actually include an agenda item. And so if there's a way to create like a program or some kind of a policy or a process, just so that we know and we're not missing any kind of recognition. And then also we want to be able to be consistent in how we're recognizing people. So if the general idea is to recognize as many youth in the community, we don't want to have one group come and we print certificates or do, something that we're giving to them, and then another group, maybe it's very last minute, we're inviting them in, we're recognizing them, but we don't do anything for them to take with them. We just want to make sure that we're treating all the groups fairly instead of kind of picking and choosing.
Yep.
So I think,
Go ahead, Dave.
I think we probably need to just come up with some kind of a standard for what reaches the level that we would bring them in. Not that we don't want to bring in everybody, but so that way we can tell schools when we ask anything that breaches this level, so that they don't feel like on one hand they need to present somebody that did a nice thing every week, or versus somebody who actually went to state in something. Whatever we do, we need to just kind of figure out what that level is, and then put the responsibility on the schools and say, please inform us whenever anybody reaches this level. And then maybe what we can do from the city standpoint is create some kind of recognition level, like Mayor's Club or Ambassador of Syracuse Award, something that we can say, look, whenever you've done something that recognized the city at this level, we're going to issue, whether it's a certificate or just a word over the pulpit, that proclamation, whatever it is, let's figure out what that format is. And then I think Jordan's right. The liaisons take it to every school that you're a liaison for and ask them to help, and hopefully they will.
Brody, could I get you to direct where that contact ought to come from, a liaison in the staff?
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe I won't right now, but I think we can get you a point of contact. But first I'd want to see kind of what we're doing, right? Because that might dictate on where it's going to go. So I would say let's settle on like what our standard is or what our policy is, and then I think we'll figure out, we can figure out how to help facilitate it. I think the issue, and what Cassie was bringing up too is, staff we're built, we're going to be built more for if you develop a program that can be administered through staff, right? And it's uniform and that sort of thing. If we do sort of kind of guerrilla style accolades, like we kind of hunt for things that are worth accolades, and it's kind of free form a little bit administratively in here, it's not really built for that very well. And I think it comes better through the liaisons like you talked about, because we're not going to have our ear to the ground as well as you are.
Could I make a couple of assignments? Dave, you represents the arts academies, those charter schools.
Yeah.
And Jordan, you were the one who brought this up to us. Could the two of you sit down and brainstorm and kind of produce what Brody is looking for, is some kind of a standardization of this, and then bring it back and present it to us, and the kinds of things, what rises to that mark in your opinion, and then we can have another discussion, put something together.
I have some ideas. I think we could do this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Could
and
you
if you need any help, I can be available too. Just let me know.
You feel good with that? You okay with that? I think,
Yeah.
I think it'd be good to have representatives from the charter schools, and then, and this is kind of a pet thing, Jordan, that you've brought to our attention. Why don't you come back with us something that we can get our teeth into, that then Brody can administer?
I like
Okay.
it.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
okay. Let's move on. Items. Can we start?
Are you guys catching this?
No, the mayor's connection's bad.
I'm bad.
Your
Now I-
connection's bad.
Can't hear you.
How about now?
Yeah,
Yep.
Lisa,
Yes.
do you have anything you'd like to share in the way of future agenda items or discussion?
No. We'll be having an illumination event meeting on Friday for our Communities That Care event. With everything being pushed back, it sure has changed just the feeling of what's crucial and what's impending and what's maybe pending. So yeah, and we're working on the Memorial Day celebration. I'm working with Corinne and working on getting some speakers, but this is just, I just want to thank the staff, for those who are still having to be a part of everyday running of the city business, and appreciate all those who put in so much time and effort. But that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mhm.
Can you hear me, Seth?
Yep. 3 quick announcements today. We just found out that the state is bringing forth some seed money for future coalitions. If there's any kind of information, maybe Corinne, you could share with the Communities That Care for fiscal year 21. If there's any kind of,
Say that again. Sorry.
there's seed money that's going to be brought forth for evidence-based coalitions moving forward for expansion or new development. And so rolling out in July. So that might be something they need to be aware of or looking towards.
Okay.
And then just after meeting with Cook Elementary, I told them I would bring up the idea that they're very sensitive to concerns around traffic from any of the development along Antelope. And they mentioned that we should obviously keep in mind that it's not just development in Syracuse, but also Clearfield development and how it affects and impacts their schools. And then the only other thing I would mention is my wife is due any day now. And so I might be slightly MIA here and potentially need some planning commission coverage if my wife delivers the day of planning commission, which my baby's due. So,
Let me know.
okay. Thank you, Corinne.
excited for
Yep,
you.
I think we're all here for you, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
How many is this?
3.
Good for you. Good for you. Corinne?
Congratulations.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Corinne?
Couple things. First of all, I was contacted by Shelley Thorne over the pageant, and they're wanting to move forward right now with the pageant, with doing a Facebook Live orientation on April 9th, so that the committee and girls and their mothers can have comments and questions. And then on April 30th, they're going to be doing some resume and interviewing workshop. They might have to do that through Zoom or something like that. They're looking into that at this time. But they're trying to plan as though it's going to happen. And as we all need to have hope, they would like to hope that this happens as well. And they actually have had some calls because there's a lot of people with extra time on their hands with everything being canceled and wanting to work on these types of things. So they're moving forward. Secondly, the Memorial Day celebration, we have that underway. We are planning for both the possibility of having it be a Facebook Live event or a in-person event. We're hoping for the in-person, of course. But we have a bugler. We've got this really great trio that's going to be singing the national anthem. We have, I I can't remember what else we've got. Anyway, we're getting along the whole bit, coming along, and I'll need to talk to Cresta soon about it as well. And depending on how things go with COVID-19. So we may or may not need chairs. So, but we're going to plan it as though we're going to do a virtual meeting one way or another. And then with the elimination, that just put it on your calendars for July 24th at Snyder's Bluff Golf Course.
I
It's
think
going to
it's
be
23rd, right?
Oh, sorry, 23rd. Pardon
Yeah.
me. The day before the holiday on the 24th. It's in the evening, 6 p.m. till midnight, or till dark, when ending in fireworks. And we're going to have entertainment and booths all about prevention for those 3 things that we're focusing on, with the preventing vaping and the signs and symptoms of depression, and how to live healthy and to watch out for those things and prevent those things from happening in the first place. And if you do see them, this is what you need to do, and so forth. And doing it in a positive way rather than in a downer type of setting, especially when talking about suicide prevention. Just really talking about the good parts of life and what you can do to stay mentally healthy. So, and I've been in charge of getting food trucks, and thank you, council, for your suggestions. Everybody's been really great to get on board. The only one we haven't heard from yet is Chick-fil-A. So we're coming along really well. And then lastly, let's see. I just wanted to, I'll need to talk to Seth offline on that, about that evidence-based funding. But I thought there was another thing I needed to mention, but I think I'm good. So
Good.
Thank you.
David?
So the sewer district, and I'm sure other districts, are trying to figure out how we go forward and hold our regular meetings without, I mean, we are a body that is bigger than 10, so that's a problem. But, you know, the work has to keep going forward. We can't put things off that are vital infrastructure. So just keeping you aware that that is an active discussion. We're meeting, or we're discussing regularly alternatives in small groups so that we're not in violation, but we've got to figure out how to get that, you know, keep everything going. This situation has put a change on a lot of things. And I think that just personally, I want to see us get more active on what we can do to help everybody through it, because there, you know, as we talk about the activities that we each relate to and respond with, so many of them are affected by changes of available space, being able to meet in groups, all those things. So I'm hoping that as a city council, we can kind of come together with some and do our part and help people through that.
Thank you, David. I might tip our hat to Public Works, Robert. I know that the environmental group found in some manhole covers some blockages because people weren't using just toilet paper down the sewer, and Robert and his group.
That's been an active discussion, and I've put multiple posts out there about make sure that it's just human waste or toilet paper. Toilet paper is the only thing that is designed to disintegrate and break up. Wipes are not designed that way. Certainly paper towels are not designed that way, or corn cobs if you're that desperate. So let me just say that you've got to be careful what goes down, because we are experiencing some problems there.
But I want to tip our hat to Robert. Our boys saved us some big expense.
Yeah,
because we were ahead of the game. Okay, thank you, David. Jordan.
All right, yeah, a few things. I just want to say I've been telling y'all to get bidets for a long time, so this is just kind of vindication. Anyways, so a few things. So I went with The fire chief and, sorry, spam likely is calling me again.
That big
Anyway,
guy.
I know he calls me all the time. So I went with the fire chief and Brody for the paramedic discussions that we are having with the surrounding cities. It's looking highly likely that we will be looking to find a way to have paramedic service in the event that the county stops providing it. They will be offloading it onto either the districts, the cities. We've got a few options out there. I just want to say that Brody and our fire chief represent us so well there. As I sit there and watch them, Brody is actually kind of the chair of the council. Our fire chief was just out there pushing out statistics and data, and they are doing a phenomenal job. And we've got some good options in front of us. Some of them will actually could end up being a huge benefit to the community. I spoke with Randy Elliott the other day about some of these options, and we're gonna have some big decisions in front of us. But we'll kind of keep you in the loop on those as we get closer. They're meeting a lot more often than I am, just due to their direct influence on that committee. But there will be some changes on that front. So just want to kind of just tease that. I can talk more about it individually with you guys as we get closer. The other thing, we did meet as a parks committee. This was before the huge, what would you call it? The governor's announcement. So we met, we went over a few different things. We talked briefly about the naming of the linear park that we're hoping to push into the junior high. So they're looking forward to that, being able to meet and go over their recommendations if school ever goes back into session. We also went over some possibilities for phasing of the regional park. And overall, I'd say the opinion of the committee was they are not really in favor of phasing. Obviously, we'll get more data as time goes forward, and I wanted to go over. So Lisa sent out a great report. I didn't have much to add to it, but I did, and I just noticed it's still in my outbox, so I will send that out. But really, it came down to we need to find ways to still lessen some of the costs. I know Dave has brought up some of those ideas, and their ideas were very much in line with what Dave had recommended previously. So we'll continue working through that, getting their suggestions, then bring that to you guys as some information so we can make some good decisions with the input of that committee as well. I've also, before all of this hit, I was working with Jess Bigler. She is a representative of the, what do you call it, Corinne? Davis County Mental.
North Davis Communities That Care.
No, it wasn't that committee. It's actually
These behavioral health.
Behavioral health. Thank you. And so she was actually
yes.
trying. She's on the Syracuse Elementary Community Council with me, and so we've been working. We're going to try and put together a class for just a mental health class for both adults and youth, and we're going to do that at the library. And so we were kind of full in the throes of that when all of this hit. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's excellent. That's wonderful. Good job.
Yeah, so, well, it's kind of on hold right now due to the limitations, but I just want to thank all of those people out there that are just going out and being self-starters. I know we have a committee doing pickleball, or we just have a group that came together for pickleball courts. We have the Communities That Care, all of these self-starter groups that are just really working to make our community a better place. Every day I'm so impressed when people are willing to stand up and make a difference. There are a lot of people that are willing to just throw something out on Facebook and feel like they've done something. And I want to thank all those people that are willing to go that one step farther to try and actually get out and do something. And so, you know, Jess, the pickleball courts committee, all these people that are willing to step up and do something. Thank you to all of you. And then I think that's everything I had.
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate that. Brody, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, there's been some comments about, handling the COVID-19 thing in the city, and I just want to recognize the staff. We couldn't do it without them, and I joked with Paul earlier that, I feel like Samuel Jackson playing Nick Fury, because I get to sit in the room with all the Avengers. And it's just a great team to work with, and they're very talented. So I
I'll
just
get
want
you
to
an eye
recognize them.
patch.
Who's the Hulk?
And I'm attending all of those meetings too, and I can tell you that we have professional folks that are leading us in this thing, and we've heard you, Dave. We'll find some way to involve you. The thing is that it's taken us a bit, our normal train of communication has really been interrupted. I want to tip my hat to Cassie. This ability to have this meeting, you won't believe behind the scenes all the work that she has done to get this. So Cassie, thank you for what you do. We have a great staff in this community. We are blessed. And we're almost always a week, 10 days ahead of others. And I'm very grateful for that. Now, I'm going to call a recess of our work session and open us up into a meeting. Call the meeting to order for our redevelopment agency special meeting agenda. And so I'm calling that meeting to order, and I would appreciate a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I assume that was unanimous. Anyone disagree? Cassie, would you record that as unanimous?
I'll give
and we
thumbs
will
up if you want.
Yeah. So the meeting is now called to order. Cassie, do we have any public comment that was shared with us in writing?
No, there was no public comment for this meeting.
Okay. All right. Brody, would you like to begin this discussion? This has to do with our business community.
You're muted.
Thank you. I'll just kind of frame it up a little, and then we'll have Noah kind of go through what we're thinking about. This is obviously, something we've put together recently. We wanted to talk about it with you, but also give you the opportunity to go ahead and move forward with it. Because one of the benefits of doing a loan program in our RDAs is that the city can act fairly quickly compared to state and federal loan processes that businesses have to go through. I think we can kind of cut through a lot of the red tape that maybe they have to go through. The national and state programs under COVID, their emergency loan programs that they're putting out, they are moving forward, and they are coming through. The state website is up for businesses to apply and that sort of thing. But we felt that in our little micro economy here in Syracuse, we felt like we have a role to play. Our RDA is sitting on cash that about $1 million without any significant tenant outreach in the next budget year. We would gain about $200,000 to $250,000 in that fund. So what we thought about doing is, since we have the cash available, we set some of it aside for an emergency loan program to help some of the smaller businesses in the city, specifically in the RDA boundaries. So Noah, if you want to come online and walk us through that and see, we can start discussing that.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, to echo what Brody was saying, we are worried about our local businesses, and if we have money that is available, we wanted to get your opinion about this loan program. And like Brody mentioned, there's federal resources, there's state resources, but there are, there's red tape. Salt Lake City, I don't know if you guys are familiar, it's called Emergency Loan Program. They have $1 million and it's 0% interest, 5 years, maximum loan amount of $20,000. GoEd, Governor's Office of Economic Development, just yesterday announced what they're calling a bridge loan program. And they're offering up to $20,000, 0% interest, up to 5 years. So basically the same thing. And as what we were thinking, we could offer up to $30,000, 0% interest, up to 3 years. And once that 250 is up, it would be up. And then similar to the way the Salt Lake City and the state's doing, it'd be limited to 50 employees. And we imagine that those businesses could use the funds for payroll or lease payments. Being the first of the month here, especially businesses that are just straight closed right now, they're gonna furlough their employees or lay them off. And so being able to keep employees on a payroll keeps their employees without, there's a chance that they'll go somewhere else, find another job. And there's also, if they're not having income, there's a chance that they can't pay their lease payment to their landlord. So it's our part to try to keep the economy rolling, keep the loans from going into default and payments and things like that. So that's what we had in mind. Just curious what you guys think about it.
So this is Seth. I was just wondering how many potential facilities or locations fall within the RDA, CDA boundaries that might be applicable for this? Do we have any kind of idea?
I have. That was my question as well.
But I could show you the different.
The reason I ask is just if everybody else is kind of going with 20,000 and making sure that this is available for as many businesses as possible, we might need to consider dropping that number so that we can serve more. But if it's adequate for our location, then I'm highly supportive of this effort.
Well, I agree. First, the question is, why are we different than the other programs that are all going at 20,000 in 5 years?
We're local. I don't know how fast 8 million is going to go at the state level. Think of Salt Lake City. They have 1 million, but think of how much bigger they are than us.
Okay.
Yeah, my thoughts on that were, so we put out 30,000 before the state had advertised their program. So this was put together last week, and it seemed like a reasonable number, still kind of a shot in the dark. It was also a maximum. So if somebody came in and applied for, 25, 30,000, you could still say, no, but we'll give you 20. Or if we feel like 20 should be the, just the maximum, we can adjust that as well. So there's no hard and fast rule to that 30.
Brody, I have
flexible, and look at our term. 3 years is obviously quicker, so that would lend itself to some more flexibility, I think, in the amount of loans.
The other thing I'd like to see, am I on mute? Okay.
No.
Can you guys hear me?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Yep.
So one thing I'd like to kind of do here is, I think we leave it at 30, but I would kind of like to scale it for employees. If they're a one-person outfit, or maybe 2 or 3 people, where my goal here is to try and keep as many people employed as possible. If we start running low on funds, I'd kind of like to have the max be scaled based on the number of employees you have, because my goal is to try and keep as many people on the payroll as possible. So if you have approximately 50, then yeah, you qualify for the 30. But if you only have 2, I would kind of say, all right, well, maybe it's only so much per. That's kind of where I'd like to go with this, because I have no problem with the 30. I don't think there's a ton of businesses in the RDA, but what there are, I'd like to try and be able to maximize this money for those people.
I will throw out one other concern that I have, and that is how do we manage a default? Because what if we buoy these businesses up and then only to have them within 3 months later say, hey, I don't want to pay that back, I'm going to close up shop?
So it's a good question. That's something that we've talked about. Each loan obviously would come with an agreement but there's loan management involved, and we'd have to take it on a case-by-case basis. This would be considered to be a higher risk loan.
So when you say case by case, does that mean that there will be either us or a board approving each loan, and that
We are the
some may
board.
not qualify, or are you going to, is this going to be an automatic that just Noah Steele says, hey, application stamp, here it goes?
Well, that's one thing we wanted to talk to you about. It could go either way. You could provide us with some parameters of, like Jordan was saying, some qualifying parameters, or we could take applications and bring it to you on a case by case, and you can evaluate the strength of the businesses. And it's kind of weird in this case. Usually if you're applying for a loan, you want to talk the bank.
We need to help them quickly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If we wait to bring each one to you, that's 2 weeks.
That's a long time.
That is too long, probably.
One thing you could do is if the RDA board wants to approve sort of the parameters, right, what the limits are, and then you could have maybe a subcommittee of 2 council members, or the mayor and 2 council members along with staff, to be sort of a loan application review committee, and then give that committee authorization to issue the loans within the parameters that you've set. And that way we can act more quickly and we can be a little more nimble.
Mhm.
I like that. I want to be as expeditious as possible, and I don't want to spend a lot of time discussing the parameters either. I'd like to kind of get those
Absolutely.
out there and ready to go.
I think
Brody,
we also need to notify each business, because they may not even know that we even care. So, or that it's available, and just FYI, we're making these funds available.
So
also,
are we also going to have any kind of stipulation? I mean, what if they want to do something from the state? Because the state is also doing this. Do we have any issues with them if they already are getting something from the state, they don't get it from us, or vice versa, or anything like that? Or if they want to try and get 40 grand to pay off in 3 to 5 years, that's good with us.
I don't
well, they got to pay it back, so they'd be taking on a lot of debt.
And that's my worry, is they take on too much from too many different sources and then just don't default on all of them.
Yeah, and I think we need to be, obviously you need to be sober about this. So, the national statistics are on business loans, 1 in 6 is kind of a rule of thumb, default.
1 in 6 defaults.
Mhm. So we do have to approach this, that the amount of money we make available, it is at risk of being lost.
Mhm.
The concern here is that starting new businesses in these vacant areas is a lot more difficult than if we can keep the ones that we have. And that's kind of the whole intent here.
Brody,
I'd like to suggest quickly that we don't keep it keep them from getting a loan from us if they get a loan from the state as well. It actually increases the likelihood that we'll be paid in time if they have the assets at their fingertips. I know that a friend of ours, when he was getting a loan for well, several friends of ours who've gotten loans, didn't get quite enough money to make a full go of it. And if that's the case, then your money's actually at much greater risk if they can't stay in business long enough to get their business up and going.
Brody, is the CDA triggered?
No,
Can you say that again?
The CDA, is it triggered?
no.
No, technically it's not triggered. We do have an agreement and an application. That was one of the things that I was working on with Paul to see if loans within the CDA would be possible. Because we've sort of activated an agreement in the CDA. My understanding is that because, well, maybe I should let Paul answer that, but we do have an agreement already for the CDA. It is established. It's just the increment factor hasn't been triggered.
What?
That's correct. Yeah, yes, the increment's not being collected yet. The CDA is active, so we could be entering into agreements and things like that. When it comes to cash, the state code does allow you to sort of move money from one RDA project to another, as long as it's projected to have enough money that it could pay it back. So if we have an
Right.
RDA that's a little more flush, they can give some money to the CDA area as long as we anticipate that it can pay it back. So as long as we keep that accounting straight, it's possible for us to do it.
I have a concern, for example, all dental businesses are shut down by the health department. None of it was any of their doing. We have some of those that lay within an RDA or a CDA, but we also have some that are not. Now what?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's we did have some discussion on that as well. And while there does seem to be a fairness issue with that, the city really only has the tools that it's been given.
Right.
And the RDA is really the tool that we've been given. And so, the purpose of the RDA is to, reduce blight and reinvest in specific geographic areas. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what we have available.
Yeah, we can't loan to businesses outside the established areas, and there are almost all of our businesses are within areas, at least the brick and mortar. That's the other question is, do you want us to
So-
say no home-based businesses?
And
Okay,
we need to keep in mind that this is the RDA giving the loans, not the city.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Good point, good
So-
point.
That's true.
So I want to ask about eligible expenses and how you define those. So are you asking them to come with some kind of documentation for the need and where these are going to go? Because I would be, I'm all for these two things as far as lease payments, payroll, but I would hate it if somebody took out this loan and tried to use it for, like, say, physical improvements in the building, and then they shut it down anyway, or, and they let all their staff go and suffer. We're trying to keep the business viable and their employees taken care of so they won't leave them in the lurch.
Yeah, we don't want them to show up with brand new trucks and all this fancy
Right.
things and the expansion. Yeah, we really.
So how do you do that? That's my question. How do you make sure that
We
it's
have to-
for payroll?
They have to come with
Yeah.
a proposal and
Have be stipulations.
Yeah, so we would have contractual stipulations. I mean, obviously any contract can be breached. So if you're looking for breach-proof contracts, they just don't exist. People can always breach a contract. I mean, if you wanted, it would take a lot more administration. I mean, you could have it that, they apply for a total loan and then it's distributed piecemeal, and they would bring in evidence that they spend it on those items or that at least they paid the rent and they didn't fire any employees. That's
Okay.
maybe one way to do it, but I mean, again, that's administratively, that's a lot more burden. So I don't know.
Sure.
I'm just thinking, sort of just brainstorming at this point. So I don't know whether that's something we would do, or that's the only way I can think of that we could sort of guarantee that, you know, not all that we wasted. We could say, okay, well, at least we know that this much was spent on appropriate purposes.
Yeah.
So no matter what, there's going to be an element of just trust here that the business follows the parameters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I would view this as a very high risk loan. I would expect that a lot of this might not get paid back. And as long as you walk into it recognizing that, then when businesses do go belly up, despite the help, or if there's that one or two bad people that, you know, take the money and then disappear, you have to recognize that that is a possibility. And there's only so much you can do to protect against that. You can try and get collateral, but usually businesses are they've already, you know, have purchased money security interest in those same items. So it's very difficult to secure this kind of loan against all problems. But I think that there is a level of trust that these are small businesses that are in our community, and if that's something that if that's a risk that you're willing to take, then it's something that we can do.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. We had a business that came in and talked to us today, and their revenue has dropped by 90%. And so they're looking at, okay, how do we pay employees? How do we pay utilities? How do we pay the lease? And it's a cash problem more than anything, right? So if they can get the cash to weather the storm, so to speak, then over the next, you know, those businesses that can take a long range approach can get through this. If they, you know, if the business is, you know, just they have a 5-year or a 2 or 3 year window of doing business and that's it, they're done. They're going to be toast anyway. So, but if they're here for the long haul and they have a plan and they want to try to be here for the long haul, they would just need cash to get through the storm.
I agree.
Yeah.
Are any of you intrigued with becoming loan officers?
I'm
Let's
interested.
do it.
How about
I
debt
think we need
collectors?
to.
Who wants to be the debt collector?
Are all of you willing to serve there? Now, I don't vote on the RDA, so I don't think I could vote as a loan officer, but I'm willing to attend. But I think this is your, you know, Paul, I don't vote in the RDA, right?
That's correct.
That is correct. You do not vote.
So I'll be glad to be a sidekick, but I think the vote needs to come from the two of you. If we have 3 of you, then we got a public meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Are all of you willing to serve?
Yes.
Yes.
Call you for, okay. All right. Rhodey, can we work on an organization for that then? Do you feel comfortable with moving this forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. enough?
Do you want, are you saying just find 2 council members that are available for the application, or do you want to assign 2 specific council members?
Let me assign them. I'll find them for you.
Okay.
And find them.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we'll put together organization stuff, forms, and get the word out to the businesses.
Okay. So this is a business meeting. We can vote on this tonight. I'd entertain a motion. There are 2 action items proposed. We can do nothing.
And if I could recommend, just if there are critical items that you would like to see in this program, let's make sure that that's part of this motion, because we don't want to go too far afield.
So let me take a stab at it then. Well, no, let me first say this then for discussion to see if I'm the only one that feels this way. I want to help out every business we can, but I do want to make sure that it's a business that is employing people and is an established part of our community. What I don't want to do, when I say that, I'm just trying to eliminate, if there's something that somebody comes up and says, well, I'm about to start a business in this time of hardship, that wouldn't work. Or if there's something that is already looks like they're doomed, I don't want to take the high risk of, hey, you know what? I'm just throwing away the RDA's money. That's all I'm worried about. I would gladly spend it to keep any of them open and keep their employees so that they can remain profitable for years to come.
Could we possibly ask them to bring in like their financials for February and to show us how they were doing on their books in the previous months before the quarantine started, so that we can verify that
Noah, you're sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry, just taking a few notes.
It's all good. Anyway, you didn't type anything bad, so it's all good. Anyway, so but just can we request that as part of the application, if you will, to see their financials as of February type of, or for the previous X amount of months or something.
Yeah, and at least a few.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, we would want their financials
established in our city. Do we want to set time?
No, I wouldn't, simply because let's say they started in December. Are you going to say, sorry?
So that they need to be an existing business, not.
Yeah, they do need to be an existing business in Syracuse. I still would like the stipulation that says, in order to qualify for the max amount, you have to be closer to 50 than you are to, say, 5. So I think it ought to be tiered based on number of employees. And I think that was my only real stipulations. Yeah, but I would like to see some financials to verify that they actually are a viable business, because this is a board that is in the business of recruiting business, and we can't do that if we give all of our money away.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there are some criteria for the bridge loan on the state website you could look at. Well, their criteria was you had to be established before January 1st of this year, that you have to have employees on your payroll that you pay payroll taxes on.
Okay.
Of 6 months of pro forma of estimated lost revenue or documented lost evidence. They aren't requiring collateral. They'd say, yeah, it's eligible for payroll, mortgage, utility, or similar expenses. So they have some criteria. We could adopt similar measures to what the state has.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I like it.
We could just do it faster.
So let me throw out a motion here. I'm going to say, and I'm going to throw out a couple of hopefully generalizations that work.
Before you go to motion, can I ask you a question on the criteria real quick? Sorry.
Go ahead.
What about home-based businesses? Yes or no?
Are they
well,
really
they would
in the
have to be in the
RDA?
RDA.
They might.
So there might be.
So it would be only payroll, right?
Yeah, they do more. Then we're looking at rent and mortgage payments for a home.
Yeah, I can't do that. Not on an RDA, not with RDA money.
It needs to be, does
It
that
needs to be brick and mortar, to keep brick and mortar.
Get brick and mortar?
Okay, so
what if there's a daycare inside this area that is a home-based daycare that regularly has 3 to 4 or 5 employees?
Yeah.
That is trying to make not just send everyone home, and is trying to keep things going. They're trying to bring a few kids over, but they only 2 of their normally 15 kids are showing up. Are we, and they're in this zone, are we saying sorry?
I think that would be covered under payroll, though.
And I think that they also will likely rebound very quickly. I mean.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that point was brought out.
Yeah, that is that as soon as their parents are back to work, then they're immediately back to where they were.
Right.
Yeah, and if we're in recession, their parents aren't going back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? I think that we need to just do this case by case. So I think the bridge loan criteria gives us a really good background for what we want to require. And then if somebody came to us saying they are a daycare, then we'd look at it by its credentials.
Here's an interesting idea.
I'm good
What
with
if
that.
what if the size of the loan is you can qualify for up to 30,000, but no more than $1,000 per employee that you've held for more than 3 months? That way, nobody can say, I'm going to go hire 5 people and pay, and so that I can qualify for a higher loan.
Would they already be existing on their payrolls though? You know,
So well, that's the point, is if they have to, the employee has to, they can qualify for $1,000 per employee. So anybody over 30 employees can qualify for the full 30,000. And then the other thing is for the employee to count, they have to be on the record since January 1st.
well, and it says right here, applicants must have employees on their payroll for whom they have had payroll taxes withheld. So they will have had to have shown that they can't go out and hire new people because they would already have been
Could have
able to.
hired them the week before though, and
Oh,
those
I
people aren't
guess.
likely to stick around anyway. Well, okay, whatever. I'm just trying to throw out something to scale Jordan's idea of more employees gets a bigger chunk of loan.
If you've had payroll taxes withheld, that means that they were,
They were there for at least a couple of weeks, at least a pay period.
Yeah. I think
All right,
if
so
you
I'll
kept,
let go with how long the employees, but what about the size of the loan?
I think if you
contingent
kept
on-
like a general tier, I think that might work. Because then you give your committee some flexibility based on details, because no two loan applications are going to be the same.
Yeah.
That's true.
And so if you did like 3 tiers based on
10, 20, 30.
Yeah, based on the number of employees, something like that.
So let's throw this out as a motion. I make a motion that the RDA provide loans as outlined in the criteria in the packet and utilizing the bridge loan criteria from the state's websites in 3 tiers, meaning $10,000 for 10,000 or for under 10 employees, up to 20,000 for up to 20 employees, and up to 30,000 for anything over 20 employees. Does that work? That's your 3 tiers.
I like it.
I personally, I don't want it to be only based on employees. A business is a business, no matter how many people they're employing. And it may be that they have incredibly high bills. One business may have minimal, even if they have employees, and another may have just excruciating debt that they're going to lose their business if they don't have the option of getting this loan. I think it should be case by case. I don't agree that there should be tiers, but that's just my opinion. I think it should be according to the needs of the applicant.
The only problem is eligibility.
Are about payroll.
Yeah, payroll and lease payments.
Well, that's part of what the bridge allows, but go back to the bridge and it gives you all kinds of options. It can be utilities as well. And your utilities, you may not have very many employees, but go back to what the state suggestions are. And there are a lot of things that you can use that money for, similar expenses that occur in the ordinary course of operations. Well, one business may have, sky high costs of doing business, while another may, like a daycare, would have minimal besides their employees. So that's why I say case by case leaves it open to the needs of the business owner. And they're the ones who know how much they need to make ends meet. They also aren't going to, speaking as a business owner, we would never get ourselves chained to more debt if we didn't need that money. So in order to make ends meet, and if we knew or even considered this money is going to be thrown down the toilet, why would we get this loan? We wouldn't get the loan. We would just wash our hands of it and say we can't recover.
Yeah, I actually agree that, that I can think of some businesses that are going to just be burning cash on a daily, that they have high profits, but right now they just can't do that.
Right.
And so I could see where we just make those tiers as a general guideline, but I think we have to allow for exceptions based on the business case we're presented.
Yeah,
But I do like those as general guidelines, all things being equal, but there has to be an exception for some type of business that does have high expenses that they need to cover some bills in the interim until everything calms back down again.
I agree.
So
I'm
maybe
not
it's
in
not a hard and
disagreement.
fast, but a general guideline.
I'm not in disagreement. I guess when I consider the situation, if we're really only able to cover lease payments or employees, then if they have like large debt structures, this loan's not going to save them. We just can't afford to put that kind of loan together. They're
Well,
going to
that's
be
right.
bigger than us.
Do I have we have a motion on the table. We don't have a second involving tiering. Do I have a second in tiering, or do I feel we're moving away from that?
So I will second it. However, I think there needs to be an exception. There has to be some room for an exception based
Suggest
on
a
evidence
friendly
provided.
amendment.
Okay, suggest a
Friendly amendment, then.
That was it. That there be an exception for evidence is provided that they need more than the general tiering allows.
So that we would allow the teams to make that judgment when an exception could be granted.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is that a sub?
I want to take that. I'm just, my concern is, all right, what does that open the door to? How do you judge whether the exception is, what criteria is the exception?
So do you want to say that if there is an exception requested, that a third council member be polled?
Then it becomes a public meeting.
No.
Yeah, I think what you want to, so at some point, just like at a bank, at some point it comes down to those approving the loan, right? You've got to either trust or not trust your committee.
Agreed.
And so that's the level of detail you get down to. The less discretion you want your committee to have, the more we need to come up with today.
Well, and then our expediting goes out the window when we have to halt everything. So
I'm going to accept Jordan as a friendly amendment that conditions can be applied. Just with the caveat that you're going to have to report that there were conditions back to this board after you made the loan. So if you're going to make exceptions, you've got to report to the rest of us why, so we understand.
Well, maybe there ought to be a report on every loan back to the council.
yeah, I think there needs to be a report.
That's a good idea.
I agree. And then the weight of it is definitely higher because then everybody is, reading it and looking at it.
Yep.
And they know you're going to take your time.
David,
Well, within reason.
David,
do those reports require that a closed meeting at that point?
No, we could report them.
It'd be
openly if they
reported
were
later.
right.
Oh yeah, I just wasn't sure if giving out financials of you wouldn't make it all of it public, but saying this business received this loan, that's not, I wasn't sure. I was just asking.
Oh, we probably should do that in a closed, just to give a general report of, okay, these loans were given and so forth and why in a closed meeting, but then it'd be 2 weeks. It doesn't have the time constraints that a regular council meeting does. So
what we could do, we could have public information about the amount of money, distributed, and maybe the number of businesses, and then we can always create a protected record that could be shared, not in a meeting, just could be shared with the council, and then it would just be protected, and we can't share that information because you don't really want competitors to know that their competitors are struggling. That would be
good point.
Yeah. So,
David,
do we have a clear enough acceptance of that amendment?
Why don't you do a substitute motion? Let's put that.
Oh,
good luck, Dave.
I should have written all this down. Okay, so I'm going to make a substitute motion that we enact the RDA small business loan as outlined in the loan program guidance, with the proposed 3-tiering of up to 10,000 for under 10 employees, up to 20,000 for up to 20 employees and up to 50 or 30,000 for anybody over 20 employees, with the ability to make exception for extraordinary circumstances that would lead to keeping the business here in Syracuse, as approved
Also
by
using-
members of the board.
Also
And
using the bridge loan crate.
yeah, and using the bridge loan criteria as general guidelines.
I think you got it. I'll second that.
How about then reporting back to the entire board?
Does that need to be in the motion? Okay, so, and including that all business loans made need to be reported back to this board within 30 days of giving the loan.
Okay, you have a second?
I'll second.
Any
Is 30 days too scary, Cassie? Do I need to say 60?
Sorry, is 30 days too scary?
To say that they have to report back to this board within 30 days? Should I say 60?
I mean, I would ask for,
times?
yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably, I don't know. I can't answer that question. I refuse to answer.
No
I like
comment.
that.
All right, I'm gonna give us the buffer of 60 days, preferably 30.
All right.
That way, if we can't get
That'll
together
work.
as a body because of this virus, we
Yeah.
adjust.
Okay, before I call for a vote, Brody, are you clear?
Yeah, I am. Are you clear, Noah?
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Cassie, that appears to have passed unanimously. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are now standing adjourned. I need to make a statement to you, council. Our policy concerning closed sessions does not allow for electronic communication of that. We would be asking all of you to leave and hold a closed session. So what I need is a motion from the body to set aside our rules for an interim period so that we can conduct business electronically in a closed session. That has been approved by the governor, but I need a motion from you to set aside our policy.
I will
I
make a
so
motion that we set aside the
So moved.
policy for the period. Well, don't we have to specify the period for the period that is currently under the governor's order of up till May 1st?
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Sorry, I was on mute. If I could, can I request that any council members that are in an open space either put in headphones or go into a closed room?
Done.
Closed.
I was going to make that correction and ask each of you to verify that you are in a closed space.
Okay.
Verified.
Say that we do that in the actual closed session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to,
Okay.
so the
Motion-
motion that you just made was just to set aside the rules. So we do need a motion to actually go in the closed session.
Motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Cassie, that appears to be unanimous. Okay.
So we
We're now
need
in
to
closed-
leave this, do we
Sorry,
need to leave this and go into a new Zoom room or?
I'm going to end this meeting. And then the Zoom email that I sent you this morning had a link for the closed executive session as well. So I'm going to end this meeting. I'll start the new meeting and watch for you guys to join. If you're not jumping in, I'll send you a personal invitation.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Thanks, you guys.
Let's all leave.
Thanks.